Alexandr Korol, Treatise, Frequencies. In 2011, I experienced frequency switching myself. Of course, I didn't know what to call it at the time. At the beginning of 2011, I was sitting at home, and at some point, it was as if everyone was talking to me about the same thing. Relatives wrote and called, friends and acquaintances, and they all said, "Alex, it's not good the way you're living now. You don't work, you don't study, you don't have a private life, you don't look like a normal guy. You have long hair, you write strange books, you don't leave the house. It's not good." That's what everyone started telling me, as if they were all in on the conspiracy. And they were all telling me on the same day. And in the evening, I sat down at the table and set myself the task of finding a solution to get out of this situation. Why does it happen that all the circumstances put pressure on me, suffocate me with the fact that I'm not living right? Although at the time I did not drink alcohol, did not smoke cigarettes, did not swear, did not communicate with anyone, just lived alone at home, rented an apartment and wrote books. I was happy. When I had a break from writing books, I watched interesting movies, listened to music and made playlists. This was my lifestyle. It was the beginning of 2011. And then one evening, I made a decision that I needed to create my alter ego, my second self, just like they do with superheroes in the movies. I thought that there is like one me, it is a creative me, ways that I expressed myself at the time, and that's how I understood it. And the second me is how people want to see me and what people want to hear from me. And then I made 2 columns on a piece of paper. That is, I divided the sheet into 2 parts. One column I called Alexander, my official self by passport. And the second column I called Alexandr Korol. Then I once again defined what Alexandr Korol is, and what is Alexander, who has a passport. Alexander the First and Alexander the Second. Alexander the First is a person who is in society, I called it so. That is, the first column was me, how I should be for people. And what should I be to people? I should have a short haircut, I should dress neatly, I should discuss the topics that people discuss, I should have a private life, I should have an official job, I should study. That is, everything should be like people do, because I realized at the time, and imagine I was still very young at the time, that you can't explain anything to people. People will never understand anything. They are not ready for new things. Most people have herd behavior. And if you stand out, people will never let go and keep nagging. You're gonna get downtrodden by people if you don't fit in with a crowd. And everybody's trying to fit in, because everybody's afraid of judgment. And if you behave differently, not in terms of behaving badly maybe, on the contrary, you will behave better than other people, but you will still be stigmatized. I realized that it's useless to explain to people for the 100th time, relatives and friends, that I'm not interested in buying expensive cars and showing off. I'm not interested in going out with girls. I'm not interested in any trips to Turkey or Maldives. I have always explained that I will only buy a car when I really need it, for business. And if I don't need it, I don't buy it. It's not because I don't have the possibility to buy, that's not it. I've always been laughed at by my peers. They say, "Alex, if you had the opportunity, you would have bought yourself a cool car a long time ago." You don't understand. I have an opportunity, but why do I have to buy it if I don't need it? I'm a little bit different from you people. It was getting on everyone's nerves. What do you mean, us people? Who are you? Who do you think you are? No one. You don't understand. Why are you all so weird? You're the weird one. Why? Why am I weird? Because I don't want to listen to the music that the whole country is listening to, just because they are playing it on the radio this summer? I listen to classical music instead. Is that why I'm weird? What am I doing wrong? I don't break the law, I don't offend anyone, and you'll jump on me. And because I don't have a car, you think I'm poor. Because your rule says that if one doesn't have a car, one is poor. And you don't believe that a person can have money, but he doesn't buy a car because he doesn't need it. So I faced these kinds of situations when I was in my 20s. I realized that I'm just being shushed by everyone. Because everyone at that time, my peers, had this attitude. You must have a private life, you must have a short haircut, if you're a guy, you must love football. You must have a car if you have money, if you don't have a car, then you're poor. And everything should be by society's standards. And if you're interested in something else and you behave differently, you're weird and you're an outcast. And I just loved watching movies like The Illusionist, The Prestige, Perfume. I loved these kinds of movies, and I also loved listening to classical music. But apart from that, I also liked other movies. I liked movies about traveling. I liked to listen to music for traveling, such as the band Angus and Julia Stone. And I saw that back then, in that time period, in 2011, a lot of people wanted to define me. I mean, a lot of people were even surprised that I could listen to rock music, and everyone was saying, "Come on, do you listen to rock? We thought you listened to all that classical boring music." "No, I listen to different music. I watch different movies," I explain. "I don't have to stick to one thing like you people." And yet again, people are outraged. They say, "Why like us? What do you mean?" Well, it's very strange, but it's like each of you belong to some extreme side. That is, some of you are rockers and they hate everyone else and only recognize rockers. And some of you are rappers and only like rappers and don't recognize everyone else. It's like everyone is defined in one facet of something, and I'm multifaceted. I don't know what it is, but I can be friends with rappers, and I can be friends with rockers, and I can be friends with different people, and I can be friends with nerds. And another unusual thing I've encountered since I was a kid, I had a crowd of friends who are nerds from decent families, and they were real nerdy nerds. I mean, they wore berets and trench coats, and we were always talking about all sorts of philosophical stuff when we would meet. But I also had friends who were fashionistas in Moscow and St. Petersburg, who went to fashionable places, to all sorts of nightclubs. And there too, I was loved and recognized and accepted. But it so happened that these fashionistas despised my nerdy friends, and my nerdy friends despised all those fashionistas. So it was like people were all on one extreme side or another. Let's go back again to the story in 2011. It was around spring or the end of winter. And then I sat down with a piece of paper and a pen and realized that I needed to divide my life into two parts. To divide it into two me's. The first me is my material self, for society, for people. And the second me is my soul, what I like and what is mine, close to my heart, which is useless to tell or show to anyone because no one will understand it. And the first me, which is material, I made a list of things. I wrote down what all these people, friends and relatives wanted, what they were always nagging me about, what they were always talking about, and what they wanted in general. I wrote down what they wanted for me to study, to work, to dress neatly, to have a girlfriend, and to be such a nice boy with a short haircut, with fringes and glasses. And then that's it. I'm a normal guy. And that I would have a car, a dog, everything like people have. I should know about new trendy movies that everyone watches. I should watch the series like everyone else. I should play computer games like everyone else. And I have to be that kind of person. And this first column, I called it Me Human. And the second list, that is the second column that I made, is Me Real. I called it that way. Me Real. That's my heart. That is my soul. That's me being in my cosmos. And there I've written down my favorite music, my playlists, which are not trendy, not cool, but personally mine, by my individual taste. And there was a lot of romantic music, like from the movie A Lot Like Love. And there was also music like Angus and Julia Stone, then Alexi Murdoch. I really liked listening to his music. But I also had different underground music, like Tom York's various projects, Atoms for Peace, for example, also Massive Attack and Uncle and Nine Inch Nails. I mean, there was a lot of different music. And I realized that this playlist was all mine, something that people wouldn't understand, would laugh at. But it's mine. It's for my soul. It's what warms my soul. And I also made a list of what I would like to wear. And it was a different kind of clothes compared to the first list. I didn't want to dress like the young man in Europe, like Ken from Barbie. You know, a haircut, a jumper tied around the shoulders, a shirt, trousers. I didn't want to dress like that. I wanted something languid, to be dressed like a bum, like Kurt Cobain used to wear, some kind of oversized jumper with long sleeves so it'd go right over the palms, or some kind of hooded sweatshirt, long hair, something that I liked better, like it warmed my heart. Also, I like clothes like American farmers wore, a waistcoat over a plaid shirt, a red nylon waistcoat over a checkered shirt with a tracker cap. That's what I wanted. From that list, the movies to my heart's content were like Big Fish, Interstate 60. I don't remember which movie came out earlier, maybe I watched some of them later, but movies like The Prestige, The Illusionist. I just don't remember what came out in those years and what came out later. Also, I liked movies like Anonymous, it's relatively new. I also liked all kinds of historical movies about knights, as well as weird movies like Being John Malkovich or the movies Powder, Twilight. That was what I liked. And there was the kind of thing that I wanted to wear black clothes and listen to that kind of music. In that world which I liked, I was interested in photography, that is, in creativity. You know, I like the guitar, dogs, I love animals. Dogs like a Labrador. Then guitar, photography, cameras, taking pictures. It's artistic photography, taking cinematic photographs. I also liked all kinds of independent movies, indie movies like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. I like the music from that movie too. I like the movie Obsession about a ballerina, the movie Angel A. That is what I liked. So I've divided my life into two columns, and I agreed with myself that I would respect the boundaries of these two worlds. And that when I was alone, I could dress as I wanted to my heart's content, and listen to such music, watch such movies. I also loved drawing back then and writing my books because this world inspired me to write. It was only in that state, because of those movies and music, that I was inspired and stayed up all nights and wrote my books. That's what fueled my heart. But I also realized that even though I didn't like it, but I knew in my mind that I had to do it. If you have to do it, you have to do it. I realized that I had to fit in with the 21st century times and fit in with society. And then I built a relationship with a girl, rented a family flat in the city center, started to dress in a gentlemanly way, let's call it that, and such European classics. Boots with a British round nose, corduroy trousers, different jackets. I cut my hair short then. Although I had cut my hair even earlier, I was already influenced by society. I had a short haircut even then. I was influenced even before I made the list, because I was being nagged at. Everyone condemned me for having long hair all the time. At school, then at the university, at work, everywhere, everyone was picking at my hair. And I couldn't bear it anymore, and I cut my hair short. And I then asked my girlfriend what she and her friends, her mates, her relatives, and what they liked about their world. I asked her, "Can you see that I am not like your friends, your mates, and your acquaintances? That I'm sort of from a different world. Do you see that? Do you feel that?" "Yes, I can feel that. Yes, I see it." "Alright. Can you give me some pointers? I want to get into your world. I like your world. I can see what world you're from." And I didn't know it was called frequencies. I just said different world. "I can see you're from another world. Tell me, give me some advice. How do you dress in your world? How should I dress? What do you eat? What movies do you watch? What music do you listen to?" And she starts listing all the different things. I made a list. I called it a mold. She says to me, "It would be cool for you to get some Armani glasses." It was relevant at the time. Then she said, "Armani jeans, some branded sneakers, some sweatshirts." "Okay, look, can you help me with all of it? I'm probably gonna pick something wrong. So when you have time, can we go shopping together and you can help me pick things?" "Of course." We met a week or two later, and I bought all new clothes, jeans, shoes, jumpers. I already had a short haircut. I put on Armani glasses. So I'm dressing up as a neat guy. I called it Armani frequency. At that time, they were the kind of boys who liked to wear jumpers, jeans and a jumper, and they drove BMWs. She was from that world. She had an older brother who dressed like that, so she referred to how he dresses. That's what she told me when she was helping me with my new look. So I changed my clothes. Then she told me what kind of music they listened to. I can't remember exactly, but of course, the most pop music the society listened to at that time. What was trendy in 2011? That's what she and her friends listened to. It was what everyone in society listened to, what was fashionable for the time. So there was no particular style. Next, she says she likes to watch TV series. That they watch different TV series, play computer games, and go to restaurants. I said, "Show me what restaurants you go to," and I immersed myself in all this, and then I asked, "Well, am I fit to enter your world like a spy now? Will I be recognized by this pack of people in your world?" "Yes, of course. Basically, everything is perfect." And she says that now I'm like all the boys her girlfriends like, and that I look like all her classmates. Great, but then I asked her, "Listen, I'm going to meet your, let's say, friends, acquaintances, and we'll start talking. What shouldn't I talk about so I don't scare them?" "Alex, don't ever tell them you're writing books." "Why? What's the big deal?" "Alex, it's weird." "Why?" "Because no one writes books at your age." This is what a regular person from society told me, 2011. I was 20 years old at the time. That is what a girl who was 19 years old said to me. And of course, it makes sense that no one in her environment at 19 or 20 was a writer, and she says that's weird. She didn't know what I was writing books about. She just said it's weird to be a writer, especially for me, at my age. That it's wild. I said, alright, so I've got to figure out a job. Everyone's gonna ask me what I do. What should I do? What do you all do? Or what's normal for you? I don't know. You're all about creativity, aren't you? Well, photography is great.
Writing books? Okay. But you don't want to talk about books. Taking pictures? Okay. Something creative, I guess.
Okay, creative. What kind of creativity? Well, advertising. Advertising is cool. Okay, advertising is cool. And then I got involved in my first project in online advertising. So I started working in an internet agency, and I also got an official job at a contemporary art center. I was working there as a director of development, and I also did advertising. I did that, and therefore I got closer to people again. Then I realized that I should probably have an international passport and all my documents in order. On top of that, I realized that I should probably have a personal life and buy a dog. And I said earlier that I rented a flat, built a relationship, started living with a girl and got a dog. I started cooking dinner in the evenings and eat 3 times a day. That is breakfast, lunch, dinner, as people usually do. I was going shopping for groceries. I was not interested in it at all before. I was not even interested in what food was. I mean, people were always interested in food and discussing food. And I was forcing myself to eat food, and I had to allow myself a variety of different food. It was like I never needed it. I started trying different restaurants, different dishes, cooking different foods myself with a girlfriend. Then we started watching the series in the evenings. The first TV series I watched in my life. The first TV series of the time when it was popular. I started watching Prison Break. I was shocked. I had an impression from my childhood that a TV series was something of low quality, something multi-episodic that grandmothers watch. But here is a series of such quality, like a real movie. And I started watching the series Prison Break, bought a PlayStation 3, started playing games with her friends, with my friends. And in general, I started writing to all my classmates, inviting everyone to come visit, to play board games, inviting everyone to restaurants. That is, I was a full-fledged human. But now the most important thing. When I started doing it all artificially, just because I have to, and the word artificially sounds harsh, but the way I did it, it's not fake and artificial in a full sense, but just because I'm conscious, I had this approach to it.
Because all other people do it just on autopilot, unknowingly, in a fog, like in a dream.
And from the fact that I am awake, I have a conscious understanding of all the actions that I do. I know everything. Why do I do them, and what will happen? So it looks as if it's artificial, but in fact it's the opposite. It's as natural and as conscious as possible. I would call it that. I even bought my first car then, and because I really didn't want a car and really didn't want to drive, I gave this car to my girlfriend to drive. We traveled by car and we went to Finland, so it felt like I was such a proper young man. But the first month that I lived like that, I couldn't get excited about things. I couldn't relax and have fun like all these people, hers and my friends. I was still like a black sheep and looking at everything as if from the outside. As if I had no emotions, like I was different. People felt it a little bit, but they thought I was either sad or something had happened, or that I was some kind of very serious person. Although I just couldn't, like everyone else, goof around and act like other people. I couldn't even force myself to do it. It didn't work for me. It was like I was super conscious, always on alert. Every action, every step I was seeing as if from the outside. And yes, I had dinner, I had breakfast, I had lunch. I had relationships. I would walk the dog, I would watch a TV series, or play some games when friends came over. I would try to play for half an hour, but I had no passion for it, no interest. I didn't feel any response to it inside me. I wouldn't say that I was doing it by force, but it was as if I felt nothing. That is, nothing. My attitude towards it was emptiness. And then, after about a month and a half, suddenly something happens. I don't know what. I just suddenly became like a normal human. I started liking all the movies that this girl and her friends and my friends like. I started getting excited about dumb movies and dumb TV shows. There was How I Met Your Mother, Friends, and Scrubs. I started watching all those movies and I was fine. I mean, there's no resistance. I started to like everything. I started to like the music they were listening to, the usual pop music. And I could happily play games. I bought an iPad then. I realized that these people always dream of having everything. I bought as many things as I could, anything I could, because for some reason that was what was valued in the human world, as if you have everything, then you are a better person. I learned everything in such a way. I bought clothes. I bought different most expensive products. I tried everything I could. I found the most expensive grocery shop in St. Petersburg. I learned it all like that, and I started to like it all. I really liked it a lot. But the other thing I noticed was that when I became like that, and I started to like it all, people started to reach out to me, and I reached out to them. And I felt lonely without people. I've always felt good when I'm alone, but at that moment, I wanted to see people. I wanted to communicate with someone, as if I have an inner need for people, like I can't do without them, in a good way. Such a craving for them, such a companionable mood. I wanted a team, I wanted to be around people, I wanted to be the soul of the company. It's all happening and I've started to like it all. But then I noticed that I can't sit down to write a book in this state.
It's as if I'm never up to it, as if I can't sit still even for a moment, as if my assiduity has gone completely.
I want to talk to someone or meet someone or look at social media, but I wasn't able to sit down and concentrate on writing a book. It's like there's no creativity in this world I've fallen into. Next, what did I notice? I wanted to sit down to meditate, and I could barely force myself to meditate. I didn't want to, and I couldn't do it. I used to feel everything. I could look at the palm of my hand, pointed towards my face. I used to feel everything. I could look at the palm of my hand, pointed towards my face, and feel the rays from my hand. Imagine how I used to feel. I could feel all the people. I could feel the energy. I could turn on a movie and feel my chest burning from some love scene, some romance in the movie. And here, it's like I don't feel anything. I mean, I feel emotions with my mind like people do. But I don't have these creative, magical feelings like creative people have. It was like something in me had changed, and I didn't realize what had changed. And I arranged a day when I was alone at home, and I turned on my languid creative music, turned on my languid cosmos movies, put on my languid cosmic clothes, a black hooded jumper, and I sat down to write a book. And suddenly all the cosmos, that's what I call it, my cosmic state, that is creativity, that inspiration, that energy, it all came back. And then I already realized that it was like two different worlds, like two parallel worlds. And that's when I called it frequencies. That it's like two opposite frequencies. That there is a frequency that is mine, like the movie Big Fish, or like in the movie Route 60. Like something otherworldly. I then started to call it the corridor. It's some kind of otherworldly world where there are miracles, magic, and everything magical, and there are creative people on that frequency. I called it my frequency, and that I am Alexandr Korol, writing books. And there is as if another world, opposite, and this world is not the world of the heart, but the world of the mind. That is the material world, where there are no miracles and magic, but there are other advantages in it. Because in the material world, you want to look good. You want to buy everything, you want to travel, and you want to be with people. And you, first of all, you want to work, and you love money. You appreciate it, and you don't fear it, and you don't despise it. And in my creative, magical world, where I am real, what I like and what is in my heart, it's the opposite. You don't care about money, you don't care about people's opinion, you don't need people. You're happy alone with yourself. You're just happy to see a butterfly flying. You're happy when you just take a picture of something unusual, a reflection in a puddle, and it makes you happy. And you're not chasing fashion trends. You don't care that you're wearing your favorite jumper that your grandfather gave you. So that's the world of the heart. And in the world of the mind, the one I got into on purpose, where people live, it is important that you're fashionable, cool, trendy, that everything is stylish, expensive. It's very important there. I realized that there were two parallel worlds, the spiritual world and the material world. There are people who live in the spiritual world, i.e. in the world of the heart, and there are people who live in the material world, in the world of the mind. That's how I saw and felt it. And I saw that both worlds have their advantages, and both worlds have their disadvantages. Let's say in my world, I call it the languid world, this corridor. It's like a world of solitude. You're a loner and you're creative. If you get into this world of mine, this real world, it's like you can write 10 scripts for a movie. You can make 10 top music albums. You can write a bunch of books. And you can do that 24 hours a day, and you don't need anything at all. And in that frequency, you don't even want to eat much. You just eat a sandwich with tea, and you don't need anything else. That's the world of the heart. That's what I call it. My real world, where I lived, but I was whipped for it by the system. And the material world, it's the opposite. You're always hungry for something. You're always hungry to make money. You're always hungry to buy something. You need people. You want to meet people. You want to socialize. You don't want to be alone. You don't want to be at home alone. So it's two opposite rhythms. And that's the kind of discovery I made back in my 20s in 2011. And I encountered it in such a way that it happened in my real life. As many people know, I never read any books and I never listened to anyone. So it just kind of worked itself out that way. And that's what prompted me to. That's when I started writing one of my first draft books. The first version of the book, Frequencies. There were two drafts. There was The Corridor, which was about my world of heart and magic. And then there was a separate book called Frequencies, where I talked about how there are these two opposite rhythms, and that those people who want, let's say, to switch on chakras or learn to meditate, something magical like in the movie Route 60, if they want some miracles, if they want to fall in love, or if they want inspiration to come back, if you're a creative person, then you need to get into this corridor, that is, into this world of magic, into this languid world. I've called it in different ways. I've also called it the nameless frequency, because it has no name, it has no certainty. It's a world where you're not attached to anything. I also called this frequency the frequency of the angels, because in this frequency of the heart, you are not attached to anything. It's as if you're always somewhere, you're always changing your place of residence. You have no personal life, you can't work according to the schedule. You're suffocated by it all. So you're like an angel, in a sacral sense, because angels have wings. I think it's a sacred language. It means that you're not defined. You're not in the cell of society. You're not in the society. You are in another sort of parallel reality, in this corridor, as I call it. And from the fact that you're always in a suspended state, that you're not defined by who you are, and you are not defined by where you are or with whom, then as long as you're like that, that's why miracles happen in your life. And that's why what I called the channel with the cosmos is open to you. This is the connection to be a creative person, to create. This is the world of the heart, or rather the spiritual world. That's where all the magic is. And on this languid frequency, on this frequency of the heart, it is when the mind is switched off, when you are without mind. You wake up when you want, you go to bed when you want, and you do everything according to your heart. When you're on that frequency, you're creative. And I used to write books on that frequency. Only in that state did I enjoy writing. And in that state, I wrote the book, The 3 Paradoxes of a Creative Person. I wrote it for more than 10 years. Every time I switched off my mind, switched off from society, went away from the world of people into the world of magic, I continued to keep my diary, to make notes of all this magic from this world, from this frequency of creativity, from this frequency of the corridor, the frequency of the heart. I captured all this frequency, all this world, all this rhythm, in my book, The 3 Paradoxes of the Creative Person. This is the world of the heart. It's a separate world, parallel to the material world. And the interesting thing is, I'll get to this later, it has more sub-frequencies, I would say dimensions. It's like the frequency of the heart, the creative frequency. It has many more different variations. But I'll get to that a little bit later. When I lived for about 6 months on this frequency that I was on, the material frequency, this is the world that the girl advised me. Imagine, in 6 months I outgrew it. It was as if I understood everything with my mind. I understood everything. Where they go, what they eat, what they listen to, what they look like. Imagine that. That is, for the first month, I was still as if I was psychologically connected to my frequency, to the spiritual frequency. And only after a month, when I had already psychologically switched to the material world, I began to see through the eyes of these people as they did. That is, I was connected to their frequency, and that's why I began to like their music, their movies, their food. And I could no longer do anything on purpose, but whatever was to my liking, take it in quotes now, to my liking. That is when I connected into that material world of the girl. Everything that was to my liking, it was no longer the same as before, but to her liking. That is a very important thing that you need to note now. It turns out that it is necessary to take note now that the soul is not spirituality. And if we pick on the words, And in order to unravel delusions and illusions once and for all, it turns out that when I lived with my heart, everything I did, everything I liked and disliked, it was from my heart. But when I started to live with my mind, I had inner feelings of what I wanted and did not want. And it seemed to me that it was from my heart, but the soul was no longer connected to the heart, but to the mind. And that's why material people often say, I sincerely, from the heart, want it. Yes, only the soul is not spirituality. He wants something from the soul, he wants it, therefore from the frequency to which he's connected to. The soul, it doesn't even fly away, or come, or go anywhere. It is your body, your physical body. It is your body, your genetic body, which has a code. And besides that, it can be connected somewhere else. And people are all connected to different frequencies, as it turns out. And it turns out that I was connected to the frequency of the heart world, and that's why everything I did was according to my heart, because I did not live according to a list, not according to some rules. I did what I felt was pleasant for me. Only then I was initially connected to the world of the heart. And when I was connected to the material world, when you connect to it, you start to consider this world as yours. That it's like it's your soul, and you live according to your soul. That is, your desires are transmitted to your soul. And it turns out that when I connected to a material frequency, if there was money on that frequency, money started to attract to me. If there are certain people on that frequency, these people start to attract to me. I start to see them, and they start to see me. It is as if it is a whole labyrinth that is lined up in front of me. And I also appear to everyone who's in this world. It's like a subway line. And the point is that I was surprised when I noticed that there are so many such parallel worlds, that is, frequencies. And that we can walk on the same road, but we are all from different parallel worlds. And we may never even notice each other, and the best part is, we may never even physically see each other. Because those who are on the same frequency, they are on the same road at the same time. And those who are on a different frequency, they walk on this road at a different time. So the point is that all people are connected to something, and what you are connected to affects you in the future. This source, it gives you those desires that are inside of you, your choice and what steals your attention, what you focus on, what you like, what you don't like. It's actually not you. You just plugged into a frequency. And I wrote about this in a book back in 2011. And it's okay that I realized then that there is a material frequency and there's a spiritual frequency. That is the frequency of the heart and the frequency of the mind, and that you can be connected to both. So I realized that if there is a person from the material world who does not feel or see magic at all, then if I surround him with spiritual elements, elements from the world of the heart, he will be connected to the frequency of the heart. That is, I realized, taking myself as an example, that people can do this. They just don't know it. And naturally I tried it. I found a person from the material world, my classmate, and I told him, listen, can you not give me any advice or say anything all day today? Let's just do it my way, okay? Sure. I met him when I was in the frequency of a heart, and he was from the material world, from the world of the mind. We met, and I took him to my world of the heart, that is, to the world of magic. That is because I was connected to this frequency. We walked in the city, and I showed him everything. Other buildings, other music. We walked on other paths, on other roads, and talked about things that are in my world of the heart. And while he was with me, he tapped into that, and he says he doesn't recognize the city, that he sees everything differently. It's like he doesn't understand what happened, but it's like he doesn't recognize the city, but everything seems the same, but it's not. As if everything's changed somehow, or it feels like it's been a long time since he's seen the city, or it's been a long time since he's been there. I mean such a clear, unusual perception of the city, and all the buildings and people. That's what happened to him. His angle of perception changed because he switched to another frequency, to my spiritual, magical frequency. And I noticed that if I connect to the material frequency, I have only thoughts and desires there, and some advantages and disadvantages. And when I connect to the spiritual frequency, I have other thoughts and desires. I pay attention to other things, everything is different. I began to feel this clear distinction. I began to live in this material world, but when necessary, I disconnected from it and went into my spiritual world to continue to do creative work, that is, to write books. And it also happened that I could, let's say, get acquainted with someone from the material world, and then go for a walk with him and show him my world, this spiritual world. And people were very surprised by that. They say, "It's so unusual, it's like there's something wrong going on." I mean, what's wrong with that? It's weird, the music is so volumetric and so different, it's all so beautiful. Everything in my world is beautiful. What is your world? Well, we all live in different worlds, that is, different frequencies. You live in the material world. I live in the spiritual world. There are many wonders in the spiritual world. And the man marveled at how many different miracles could happen there. You see, we could be sitting on a bench and a pigeon would land on us. A man would come up to us and recite a poem. Some fairy tale, fantastic, magical, romantic events happened. And they always happen when you are at this frequency of a heart. And in the material world, it's different there. When you are connected to the material frequency, which I liked, you are so structured, collected, punctual. Everything is on time, everything is clear. Everything is on schedule. You like it, it energizes you, drives you, toughens you. In this material rhythm, you want to work, to do things, to strive upwards and forward. You want everything of better quality, and you strive for it on the material frequency. But on the spiritual frequency, it's different there. There, you don't want it all. So you just want to go to bed when you feel like it, wake up when you feel like it. When you are in the frequency of your heart, you just want to be inspired, to take pictures, to walk, listen to music with a photo camera, or just write books. And you don't need anything else. You don't want people for company. You want to walk alone. And in the frequency of the heart, there are so many things that you like, but that people don't like in the material world. So it's like parallel worlds. I felt this difference and kept making 2 molds of those worlds. That's what I call it, molds. So I was making a mold of the heart frequency. I called it the nameless frequency and the corridor frequency. And I also made a separate mold of the frequency of the mind, that is the frequency of society, of the material world, so that the readers could also switch when necessary, because many creative people often lost inspiration in their lives because of material things and did not understand why. And in fact, it just happened by accident that they just switched to the world where there was no creativity and inspiration. They just switched their soul into the world of the mind. Back in 2011, I made a note to myself that there are so many frequencies, worlds, and I, at that time, divided in such a way that there is a spiritual world, it is one, and the material world, there are many of them. I said that you can imagine it in different ways, and I then came up with a number that there are, let's say, 12 frequencies. And besides the fact that there are 12 material frequencies, they also have sub-frequencies, that is, dimensions. And then I understood that there are people who live in society, in this material world in which people live, that they live on a good frequency, where you're always in a good mood, where everything is always good, where you have plenty of money and everything is good with your health. But I also noticed that there is an unfavorable frequency, where people who are connected to it, they have troubles. They always break their legs, break their arms. They always fall victims to thieves. There's always some grief in these families, always some problems. And the interesting thing is that I've dealt with this before. Because when I lived with my heart and was in my own cosmos, I noticed that when I met with one person, let's say with some serious rich man, I felt that at the moment of the meeting and after the meeting, that I immediately felt so confident. It was as if I wanted to work, and I was not afraid of people. I was energized, and all was just wow. But as soon as I got home, that feeling was gone. And I realized that I was starting to feel that way because of this person. I mean, he's plugged into this certain frequency, and while I was interacting with him, I just happened to plug into his world. But I noticed another thing, that I could meet a person who had an unhappy life. And I noticed that after meeting this person, I walk down the street and I see that people everywhere are ugly. A lot of vagrants, criminals. It's dirty everywhere, everything annoys me. I didn't understand why, I've never been annoyed by anything, and then everything starts to annoy me. I already realized that I was very sensitive and that I felt people. And then also, a long time ago, people told me that it's empathy, that I am an empath. How does empathy work? When you are not connected to the society, but when you live with your heart, that is in this corridor, I call it the angel's frequency. Then you connect to the frequency of the person you are currently talking to. And I have always had this ability since childhood. I could not control it, and it turns out, if I met a creative girl, who is a photographer, we were walking down the street and I was overwhelmed and had tears coming out of my eyes from happiness and beauty as I saw how beautiful everything is, and I did not understand what was happening. In fact, I was just seeing the world through her eyes and her soul because I connected to her world. And then I could meet another person who was very confident or very angry, and I would start to feel the anger in me, and I would start to get pissed off by everything around me. I'd realized that it wasn't my feeling, and it was like I wanted to shake it off. Then I realized that because I was just talking to someone, either on the internet or seeing someone in person, I just connected to that person by accident. And for this reason, in order not to be connected to something bad, I tried always, when I went to bed or when I woke up, more often when I went to bed, I meditated. Because through meditation and through the fact that I was writing books at night, it was as if I was bringing myself back to this assemblage point, to this frequency 0, that is the frequency of the heart, the languid frequency, the frequency of magic. I was putting myself back into it and everything was happy, loving, magical, and everything was beautiful. But once I started communicating with someone again, whether physically or online, I'm not talking about communicating like texting and dating, just someone I might be socializing with at school or at work, or even just a relative, then I might notice later on during the second half of the day that I don't feel the same today as I always do when I'm in space. I could notice that I was either afraid or insecure, or that something was hurting me, and then it turned out that I was connected to that person, or rather, to that source that he's connected to. A wise man gave me some advice. He said, "Alex, be careful. If you connect to a bad frequency, then all the troubles that are there on this frequency will attract you. Do you understand?" Yes, of course. And then I started to work on identifying these bad frequencies, so that I wouldn't get into them, so that I wouldn't just know them in theory. You see, I could always be connected to my magic frequency, but when you are connected to it, everything that you like is right and that's it. You are happy and you are safe. That's how I lived my life. But I liked and wanted to know society, that is the whole material world. I wanted to know all these frequencies, and I tried to write them all down, to record them all, to know what elements could connect me to what frequency. And I was making a list of bad elements, bad frequencies, in order not only to protect myself, but also to protect my readers. Because there are many frequencies in society, 12 of them, figuratively speaking, theoretically speaking. And there are high frequencies as well as low frequencies, or rather sub-frequencies, but it is not so important. And I could meet a person when I was, for example, in Cosmos. It's just when you live with your heart and when you are in Cosmos, in this corridor, you are on the frequency of angels. You see all layers of society, that is, all worlds. As I have always seen them since I was a child, I could go to any world, and I met people there. I saw that there are all sorts of people in different worlds, but I don't know what's in their world until I'm plugged into it.
And I could meet a person and would talk to that person. I began to feel like him, to see like him. I had all desires and wants that he had. They automatically appeared in me as well.
And besides that, I had a dialogue with this person and asked him what he likes, does not like, what he lives for, what he strives for, what happens in his life. You see, when you get acquainted with a person who tells you that one of his friends died, another classmate died, he broke his leg, his car was stolen, his bag was ripped off. When you listen to all these stories, you realize that the person is from such an unfortunate world. And then I approached it intelligently. I was writing all my scientific works, all my drafts since childhood. I started to study what elements there are in his world that keep him there. So it turns out that if he is, figuratively speaking, on frequency 555, let's call it a code, then everything he does and everything he prefers is also of this number, 555. And if I surround myself with these elements, I will attract all the nasty things that happen in his life. And I immediately started studying what, first of all, he wears, what he likes. I make a list of everything that steals his attention, what's on his radar. Because what frequency you're on, that's what your attention is focused on in the world. That's how interesting it is. That's the degree of perception, that's the angle that you live in. We have a website in Russia called vk.ru, which is like an analog of Facebook. And at that time there was a function where you could write a status on your VK page. And I was 22 or 23 years old at the time. That is, I was still very young, it should be taken into account. What you are into at that time and at your age, and what I was into, I couldn't tell anyone about because they would think I am nuts. Because at that time, people watch only comedy programs, jokes, funny videos, and nothing else. And then I searched for the status, rest in peace, on VK, because that's what they write when someone dies. And then you could click on this status, and all pages of the social network of people who had similar status were shown. And I then put the age, date, and identified all the people in St. Petersburg who are my age, young people, who died during the last month. And I did this in order to look at their social network pages, to see what they were doing in the last month. I mean, what they were doing, that's what connected them to self-destruction, you know? The point is, I've realized how the system that we live in works, and I'm like a hacker of that system, and I'm sharing all kinds of life hacks in my books. I realized that what they've been eating and listening and watching and doing and looking like for the last month, everything in general, it's all a mold. That is, if I take a list of elements from their world and surround myself with those elements, I will be hit by a bus, you know? And I'm suddenly starting to notice what all these guys have things in common. I noticed that these guys had fake clothes, like Gucci, but fake. If you talk about the girls, they all looked, I called it old-fashioned. That is, not modern, but as if their grandmother had dressed them, or their mom, who is very old, who is not modern. They had hair extensions, they had long nails. And I noticed that they liked things like a pink puffy coat or a gold puffy coat. And the guys had this style. If their hair was long, they had their temples shaved on the sides. Or they had a fishtail hairstyle, or just short haircuts. Then I noticed that their mobile phones, people of these low frequencies, were covered with stickers. Then I found similar people of low frequency in real life to find out what they had in their lives. And they didn't have a standard ringer on their mobile phones, but some kind of melody installed. And the mobile cases are not just transparent, classic, original, and some kind of case book that opens. And they wore certain brands. I do not want to list them, but they were fake. One of the things I can say is that people had fake clothes. Music. The most interesting thing is that many people had music, and I don't want to list the artists so as not to offend anyone. That is, I have nothing against these performers.
Musicians are talented and real.
But people who get in trouble, they prefer certain music for some reason. There was certain music, certain movies, certain shows, certain clothes. I checked what cars those people had. I recorded all this, and of course, I published this mold, this list on social networks, and wrote to my readers. Be careful, do not let this into your life no matter what, because if you surround yourself with these elements, if you start to want and like it, you will attract trouble into your life. That's the kind of list I made of what's forbidden and to be avoided. And that was back then, 10 years ago. What happened next was even more interesting. Around the time I was 23 to 24 years old. It was 2015, a tragedy happened. A plane was flying from Egypt to St. Petersburg and crashed. Naturally, it was a tragedy and everyone was grieving, considering that I am from St. Petersburg. And I found a list of passengers on the internet. And I published this list of passengers in my social network, appealed to my readers and said, let's test my theory. Would you please look at their social media accounts and see if they all have the elements I listed? Music, movies, clothes, cars, style even, how they look. Check it out, please. And the end result was shocking. My readers were writing to me in private messages. Yes, that's it. And start showing me. Look, Alexander, everything is just as you said. Those people had all the elements you've listed. Most men had particular handbags, like shoulder bags. And then they had wallets, like crocodile leather wallets or some kind of handmade ones. Women had long nails and colorful and flashy clothes. At that time, there were shoes, women's sneakers, but with heels. It was like a raised heel. A lot of women had these shoes. They also liked gold sneakers, so women had some silver or gold sneakers. Phones were all with stickers or had weird covers. Everything was colorful. If these people had a car, they had stickers on it. At that time, a lot of people had stickers with different phrases. Also, the music is the same again, coincidentally. I'm sorry, I can't list these artists. The music is all the same, they all had the same playlists. And of course, there were people of different ages. The older people had the same music, the younger ones had a little bit different music. But all of that from the same list I made. And my theory was confirmed. And then I had a kind of epiphany. Suddenly I understood and realized what power to harm in black magic. Since I had such a deep outlook on life since childhood, even when I was not a writer, everyone asked me for advice at school and at the university. Everyone liked to talk with me, to ask me questions. People always wanted to ask me for advice or wanted to hear my opinion on something. And I remember that people used to ask me such questions. How do I understand what the soul is? Is there God? Does he exist? And I was also asked about power to harm and all kinds of superpowers. And then I had an epiphany what it is. So here it is. If I find a person from a very low frequency where he has only troubles, and if I take a whole bunch of low frequency elements from his world and surround, let's say, you with these elements, then you will be connected to this unfavorable frequency, and you will have troubles in your life. That's how it works. So these are just frequencies, no miracles. And then one person, a businessman, told me it was just significant for me. I was a young guy at that time, and here was such a serious man, and he said to me, Alex, in the 90s, a lot of authority figures, bandits, used fogging. He says there was a method or technique called fogging or fooling, and there is also a phrase from it, to fool one's head, and that an old grandfather who was a gangster, an authority figure, an outlaw, could just sit calmly but everyone was afraid of him, and it was as if nobody could do anything to him, and everybody didn't understand why, and he says, it could well be because he was forcing his will on others. And then I had another epiphany. I understood how to control connection to other frequencies, and how to make sure that if you communicate with someone or see someone, that this person connects to your frequency instead of you do to theirs. And how did I notice this? I decided to do this fogging technique. How does it work? If I'm meeting you right now, I told you, let's meet at the cafe at 7 p.m. Let's make it 7:30, you say. And the point is that this adjustment you made is you bending me towards you. And I, in order not to be influenced by you, I still have to adjust something so that it will happen my way. And I say, well, let's make it 7:50 then.
All right.
That's the first time I bend you my way, because I had my own set time when we met. Then you come to the cafe at 7:50, I come to the cafe at 7:50, and you've chosen a table and you're sitting at it. I say to you, why don't we move to another table? And you defer to me. I am therefore forcing my will on you. So that's plus 1 point. I'm bending you towards my world. So you and I sit down and we choose something to eat and drink. And you, naturally, in your soul, in your frequency, you want to choose what's in your focus of attention. You want to choose, as an example, your favorite salad and drink red wine again. And I'm telling you, wait, why don't I order? You naturally resist and I say, try something new in your life. Why do you keep ordering the same thing? You won't know until you try it. You won't know if you like it. All right, you say. That's an extra point. That's 3 times I've bent you towards my world. And I order you a completely different drink which is not from your world, and a completely different food. To bend a person, it is clear that all people are different, but you need at least 5 times, 5 steps of bending. We've only done 3. What's next? The next thing he says is, Alex, well, tell me what's going on in life. And the point is, if he brings up a topic of conversation, I have to stop it again and bring up my topic of conversation. So I bend him 1 more time, and that's another plus 1 point. So I've bent him 4 times. I've got 1 more time to bend him. You can think of anything you like at this point. Let's say I tell him, hey, why don't we switch seats? Why don't I sit in your seat and you sit in mine? Because I don't want to be distracted. There's people walking on the street. I'm looking at them through the window. Why don't we switch seats? Sure. That's it. That's the 5th time I bent him towards my world. Now he's in my frequency. What is it when I bend it and it's on my frequency? If magic, insane confidence, insane ease and luck and money and so on are on my frequency, then this person immediately starts getting commissions. That is, everyone starts writing to him, calling him and offering him, let's say, money. If this person was not confident in something, in himself, and often bumped, stumbled, forgot something, then suddenly he becomes collected, concentrated, and everything goes well and he's in a great mood. And I have never done this on purpose before, but I remember many cases when someone could have a conversation with me, and it happened that he deferred to me in everything. And the person would tell me after the meeting that he felt so unusual while driving home, and he felt so unusual at home. And in fact, the person was starting to feel the way I was feeling because they had tapped into my source. That's how it works. Now let me give you an opposite example. Imagine that I am meeting you in a cafe, but I have completely deferred all decisions to you. I say you choose the place, you decide what time we meet, I'll adjust. You pick a table, I'll agree with everything. Then I say, look, I've never been to this place before, choose a meal for me. And when I do that, I connect to you. I connect to the source that you are connected to. And if there is such a thing in your world that you often, as an example, when you walk around the flat, you often hit the table, then I start hitting the table. And there was this real case when all of a sudden I started to feel kind of off. I felt that it's too noisy in the restaurant, and I'm annoyed by the way all the people are talking. And then I stand up and suddenly I hit the corner of the table. And afterwards, I asked the person I was with, "Hey, do you hit a lot?" "Yeah, listen, last week I got so banged up, unbelievable." And he's showing me the bruise. "Okay," I said. "Listen, we're sitting here in the restaurant right now. Do you get annoyed at the way people make noise? It's very annoying, it's a nightmare. I get it." "What is it?" "No, nothing. It's just like weird. While you were gone, I was sitting and waiting for you, and there wasn't this noise. And then you come in, and there's this noise. It's like I can hear it through your ears." And now, the most interesting thing is that if the world you live in is unfavorable, if in your world you have diseases, you have no money, you are always deceived by some people, or in your world you fight a lot, all these things will start to happen in my world. And what is the conclusion? That if I connect to you even accidentally, then when I return home, I must remember to disconnect from you. In order to disconnect from you, only prayers or meditation will help. It helps to disconnect. I have been collecting lists of frequencies elements for more than 10 years, both material and spiritual, low level and high level. And all these worlds are somehow open to me. I can find myself in one world, then in another, then in the third, then in the 10th. But I notice that people who live in these worlds, each of them has his own world. They cannot disconnect from it. Somehow, all people are attached to all these frequencies. That is, if a person is on his frequency 555, he stays on it. It is very difficult, almost impossible to switch off from it. So all people live on their own frequency. And each person, that the frequency on which he lives, is completely sure that the whole world is like this, that all people are like this. Because this person, no matter if he goes to the US or to Dubai for a holiday or for work, he will still be on his frequency. He will still choose a hotel of his frequency, and there will be people like him there, and they will have common topics to talk about. He will even meet his acquaintances there, because he lives on this frequency, and they all cross each other's paths. And I notice that when I'm on the frequency of the heart and magic, that is on the creative frequency, in addition to the fact that all worlds are open to me, and I live in this magical world, it is as if it is not a world of people, but a world of angels. I noticed that there, in the world of the heart, in the world of magic, I came across people who are magical, unusual, and they are also like me. It's as if we share a common source. It is understandable that a person may be of a different profession altogether, but all these people are creative. I've noticed that these people are of this corridor frequency, or angel frequency, whatever you want to call it, spiritual frequency. I've noticed that these people are more alive, more aware, more multifaceted. It's like they see things that the people of society don't see. And these people like to collect things. They're like a person of the world. These people I also called entities, because this person is not identifiable, he is not defined. So I also called this frequency nameless. And I met such people all over the world. When I lived in Los Angeles, I met people like that, and I was very pleased that there are people like that everywhere. And if they were connected to something, I used to think, to something so cosmic or divine. So I used to call such people astronauts. I liked to talk to such people most of all, because they were the only ones who did not define, did not push me into any societal frames. Only they understood me and saw me without a preconceived pattern, as if they had no boundaries, as if they were like children of nature. And people of the mind and society are all limited. Everyone lives in some limit or other. And they all have their own understanding of what is good and what is bad. That is, specific categories of their own, some labels of their own.
In one material frequency, they have one understanding of what is good and what is bad. In another material frequency, they have the opposite understanding of what is good and bad. And it's as if it's impossible to please everybody. They all like something and dislike something. And these people, all from the world of society and mind, are like that. As if they always limit you as soon as they meet you. They perceive you according to their pattern. As if who lives on a certain frequency, who lives in what world, he sees me, and it is as if he does not see me, but he adjusts himself to the pattern that are given to him by the frequency to which he is connected. Because I was born, and since childhood I was in this corridor, that is, on this spiritual frequency, I could not define who I was, because I could not, like people, define myself in one of the societal frames. That is, everyone is in some societal framework, but I could not. It was like putting a lion in a cage. And it turned out that I could be anyone, live on any frequency. All worlds were open to me.
I could be any person I wanted to be, but it was limiting me. And I didn't even realize what I could do. I mean, I could open a restaurant, or I could open a shop, or I could manufacture something. But as if it was all very petty for me, as if it would immediately define me to something, limit me in something. And who am I when I can do all that? And I joked then that I was like a producer of some life, that I could get into any world. And that's why I don't live in any of these worlds of people, but I live in this corridor. I used to call this world the world of angels. Because in this world, which is a spiritual world, I also called it the no-mind world. When you live in it, there are no people of society, of material people. And if you meet them in your life, you meet them by chance. So it's been with me since childhood. I noticed such a thing that when a material person, if he had some misfortune, then somehow life brought us together. Because when a person had a misfortune, his mind was switched off. He was switched off from society. His heart was switched on, that is, he fell into the frequency of the heart. That is, he got to the spiritual frequency, that is a corridor, and that is why he saw me and I saw him. And that's how people could meet me. And at that moment, when they had an unfortunate event in their life, they had an open heart, they did not judge me and were interested in my books. They really wanted to talk about life, to philosophize. They were interested in philosophy and romance. And then, when a person's life got better, it was as if his heart closed, switched off, his mind switched on, he connected to society again. He would return to society again, to his own world, and he would forget me, as if it was like a parallel world, that he and I would never cross paths. Neither he'd remember me, nor I him, until he had some kind of emergency again. And it's so extraordinary that when I put this theory forward, and in my draft 10 years ago wrote this and published it on the internet, 99.9% of the readers wrote that this was the reason they came across my book. That they had something collapsed in their life, someone's personal life fell apart, someone's job lost, someone had some kind of grief, and because of that, it's as if the person has gone to a different frequency, which is this corridor that I live in. I'm the boss of spiritual frequency, that's how I used to joke, that's how I used to call myself when I was 20 years old. And the man was talking to me about life, about the meaning of life, about everything. I showed him all sorts of miracles, but not literally miracles, I don't mean esoteric miracles. But in life, for example, you're walking in the park, a squirrel comes to you and dances in front of you. Or you're talking about how great it would be to eat ice cream and some man comes up to you and gives you a whole box of ice cream. I used to call situations like that paradoxes. So I wrote it all down in my book, which I have been writing for over 10 years, and I called it The 3 Paradoxes of the Creative Person. I wrote down a lot of these situations there. So in this world of creativity, the world of the heart, there are a lot of paradoxes. Every day there are miracles. You think of a concert and someone gives you a ticket. It's as if everything attracts and materializes quickly, and you don't even do anything for it. In the frequency of the heart in this corridor, I wrote the book The 3 Paradoxes of a Creative Person. And before it was finished, I kept publishing some of its chapters throughout my creative career. That is, for more than 10 years online. That is, the main book for me was initially The 3 Paradoxes of a Creative Person. As all sorts of strange things started happening to me, I wrote it all down and started keeping a diary, and then I started publishing it on social networks. Then it all came together into the first draft of the book, then another, then a third. And all these books I called Paradox 1, Paradox 2.0. And that's all now put together, and from that I made one book, which I called The 3 Paradoxes of the Creative Person. That book was handwritten by me, and it cannot be edited by anyone, otherwise another frequency will be in the book. So every single dot, every single mistake is important in my text, because this book contains the code of this frequency of the heart, the frequency of the corridor in which I live. And the most interesting thing is that when you are on the frequency corridor, all worlds are open to you, you see them. So it is such an angelic frequency. That is how all real creative people feel. They are all connected to this frequency. And since I'm a writer, I was connected to this frequency and I didn't lose it just because I was always writing. And from the fact that I am used to it, and if I start writing, I immediately get to this frequency again automatically. And if a person starts reading the book, The 3 Paradoxes of a Creative Person, he starts connecting to this frequency. His heart is switched on, his mind is switched off. He's switched off from society and he realizes the fact that he has many paradoxes in his life. Many unusual things happen. And from this world of the heart, from the world of the corridor, I often looked into society, into different worlds. And then I started to build my material world, because I wanted to be in society too. because I was an invisible person. I wanted to be somehow visible to people, and for this reason I started to publish books, to register them, to print them. I didn't want to do it myself, but I realized that the world is material, and you have to know it too. And you have to respect this material world, and you have to be adapted to it, and that there are good material frequencies. I was evolving in this material world and learning all material frequencies from lowest to the highest. I was interested in finding the highest material frequency. I found it and I had to materialize it. Hence, to physically afford all those elements that people are surrounded by, which are of the highest material frequency. And I identified then what kind of clothes, what kind of music, what kind of movies, what kind of dwellings, utensils, objects, things, everything in general. And I started to surround myself with it all. I went to live in New York thinking that one of the highest frequencies is in New York. The most interesting thing is that I walked all over Manhattan to find where in Manhattan the highest frequency neighborhoods are. And just so you understand, not everyone knows what a high frequency neighborhood is. It's a whole separate story. And I found this neighborhood. But when I told the agent that I wanted the coolest neighborhood, he didn't bring me to the highest frequency neighborhood.
Let's put it this way.
If there are 12 frequencies and the best frequency is, let's say, 11 and 12, he led me to frequency 9. And for him, he thought that was the highest frequency. I'll tell you later why that is. And he takes me to the skyscrapers, shows me all sorts of apartments, and tells me that this is where the NBA basketball team lives. Some other people live there. And I look, and there are people, women and men in fur coats and feathers, all so flashy, all have pierced faces. Their cars are too vulgar. And that's actually considered not the highest frequency. And I said no, that's not it. And then I found my neighborhood. It's Riverside. I lived at 21 West End Avenue. It's a very nice house, a very cool neighborhood that doesn't have that touristy noise. I mean, a lot of people think that if they come to Times Square and check into a hotel there, it's great. And really, it's only the low-frequency people who are tasteless that they check into a place like Times Square. But high-frequency people think it's dirty. I found this neighborhood. I love the park there, which was just recently rebuilt by the Hudson River. It's one of the highest frequency places that I liked. Because it's not vulgar. That's very important to take note of. It's not vulgar. I also looked for restaurants. And there are a lot of vulgar restaurants, but one of the high-frequency, good-level restaurants where these people who are wealthy, established, and self-sufficient come there's this art space called Gagosian on Madison Avenue. And there's a Japanese restaurant there called Kapomasa. That restaurant is one of my favorite places. I used to bring everybody there, always showing everybody that there was such a place. I liked it so much. And I started surrounding myself with all sorts of high-frequency elements. It was so unusual, people who are of super high frequency, when I met some Americans, and not only Americans, we had the same list of things, places, etc. of what we liked. I mean, this mold that I made, it matched to their lifestyle, what we preferred, what clothes we like, what style, what music we listened to, what places we went to. One American said to me, "We're ashamed of Miami, it's an embarrassment to America." He said that it's a terrible place, and all his European friends, they'd rather go somewhere in Oregon or Washington State to some of these beautiful places, like Seattle, for example. And some show-offs, wild people, such upstarts in feathers. Most often, it is the Russian mentality. They will naturally go to Miami to walk in heels on the sand, plastic people with silicone lips. And such people think that high frequency is Miami. And in fact, for high frequency people, Miami is a disgrace. Now back on topic, when I said that the agent who showed me around Manhattan was a skyscraper, and said it was super cool and expensive. And if you count it on a 12-point scale, it wasn't a 12, but only a 9. Now I'll explain why. When I was researching this theory of mine, my observations about frequencies, and trying to talk to different people about it, what if someone would at least understand me? Someone might be able to tell me something about how it all works and works in general. Naturally, I did not meet a single person who could discuss it with me. I mean, even the people who lived in the heart in this corridor, they also saw all these worlds like I did, but they couldn't even put two words together to explain it. It was like it didn't matter to them. These creative people who live in the corridor, not in the cells. And those people who live in the cells, it's useless to talk to them at all, because they only see the whole world within their cell, and they don't recognize other cells at all, which is also funny. And when I started researching all this, I came to the fact that of all the people, it didn't matter if somebody on the first frequency, somebody on the second, somebody on the third, somebody on the fifth. When I asked them what was the highest frequency, everybody described to me the same thing. But it wasn't a high frequency, but they all thought it was a high frequency. They were describing a frequency, I call it frequency 9. That is, figuratively speaking, if I now meet my classmate who works in a big company, in a serious company, earning, as an example, $5,000 or $10,000. And just so you understand, money is also not important in frequency. So frequency is a little bit different. It's like the level of preference, that is, the level of taste. And let's say I ask a guy in frequency 5, what do you reckon? What's the coolest frequency? High exactly, not cool, but high. You know what he'll start describing to me? He will start describing to me that it is when you have a Rolls Royce or a Ferrari. You live in Moscow in a skyscraper. And if I ask a person from the second frequency, that is a very low frequency, someone from a small town in Russia with high frequencies for him, he will tell me the same thing. To live in Moscow in a skyscraper, and you have some expensive car like a Bentley or a Ferrari. And when you have a gold watch like a Rolex, that's what they think. And then to go to the Maldives or Miami, they think that high frequency. And then again, there was an epiphany, another discovery of mine. I realized that people who are below the 9th frequency, they see only this 9th frequency at most. And until they know it, they will not see the 10th, 11th, 12th frequencies. And it doesn't matter if a person is of the 1st frequency, 3rd, 5th, or 7th. He still says that the highest frequency is the 9th. So he is describing Miami, Dubai, Maldives, certain brands of clothes, all under the pattern. That would describe me as the person from the most unfavorable frequency too. So they all have the same idea of what high frequency is. And you know what the interesting thing is? I met a man who is above frequency 9. He doesn't have that rustic wildness in him. That is, I meet a man who is seen as if he is blue bloods. I say to him, look man, I can see you're a different breed. What do you mean? He's asking me. Imagine, that's how I found a friend, that's how I met him. I told him, I can see that you're not like other people, that you're self-sufficient. You're ashamed to wear clothes with brand names written all over your chest. It's embarrassing to you and it's low frequency. And that you'll never drive a pink Geländewagen because it's a disgrace to you. And you'll never go to some restaurant where only the prostitutes go. And even though all the people think it's an expensive restaurant, and for you it's yuck. Yeah, all true. And how did you realize that? I'm kind of a street scientist. I've just been writing books all my life. And now I'm working on a book where I'm trying to explain it all, to prove it. I want to reach people, show them how the world works, so they can make their lives better, help them in some way. Next I talk to this man and I ask him, listen, if you were to go to US, where would you definitely not go? I wouldn't go to Miami, no way. Why is that? And the man looks at me, rolls his eyes and says, Alex, are you kidding? I understand why, but I'm just asking for confirmation. Okay, where would you go? Well, I'd go to New York or Seattle. Okay, I said, and what about LA? In doubt. Why? Well, because there are already some people out there who are drug addicts. It's a bit disconcerting. Also true. But there are certainly some good people there and places. Also true. It's like 50-50. I agree. And we discuss it all further, and I see that a man I don't know, and he doesn't know me, but he lists everything that matches my list. The highest frequency mold. He says, of course, if one is going on a trip, it's better to go somewhere like Iceland or Peru, Chile. And low frequency people have the opposite taste. They want everything vulgar, you know? And people of the 9th frequency think that the 9th frequency is the highest because until they know it, they don't see the 10th, 11th, 12th. And people think that high frequency is when you have a golden toilet, a golden car, a golden watch. You wear clothes showing off brands. You're on holiday in Maldives or somewhere in Miami. And they don't realize that the 10th, 11th, 12th frequencies, that is, the highest frequency people, they are modest. That's what you have to take note of. They are modest. A real person who is super smart, noble, blue blood, who is super rich, he looks modest. He'll dress in James Pierce, as an example, you can Google it. He can easily buy himself, for example, a car, or an Audi, or some BMW GT with a beveled butt like a family car, or some Volvo. That quality, expensive, but most importantly, it is not show-off. And of course, if a person is well off, he can buy himself an old Porsche 911 if he likes cars. But he will buy it so that nobody will ever know about it, and nobody will ever see it. And he will never tell anybody about it because he bought it for himself, just to drive around the village where he has his summer house. That's what a frequency above 9 is. Those people have always been pleasant, sympathetic for me. That is, when I was cognizing the material world, I welcomed this world. Yes, you can dress expensive and so on, but it should be in moderation. The point is that as if people from the first frequency to the 9th frequency, they don't have this control, they have everything very vulgar and colorful. And when you're above the 9th frequency, everything is very harmonious, everything is balanced. And such a person is noble. And as I have always given an example, and I will give it again, this person can, if your bicycle chain falls off, this person of the 12th frequency can stop and fix the chain for you. He will get all dirty, but he doesn't care. And the person who's on the frequency 9, his sins are so high, it is vanity, pride, that he is on the contrary. His nose is higher than the sky. And he does not want to look at anybody, does not recognize anybody. He thinks he's the navel of the earth. And all people think that this 9th frequency is a high frequency, although in fact it is a disgrace. And there are people of different frequencies, someone of the 5th, someone of the 7th, someone of the 8th, and someone even of the 9th who I've met, and he tells me, "Alex, are you kidding me? Why don't you put this on social media at all? Why don't you even say you know this artist? Why don't you say you have a place like this? Why don't you say you have this? Who am I supposed to tell and why? Come on, it's so cool. Let me see it." He asked about something that I have. Let me write it. Can I live in it? Can I touch it? So he kept asking me to use my things. Well, sure, I say. And it turns out that all these people, from the 1st frequency to the 9th frequency, they're always bragging about all my resources or possibilities, and amazed trying to surprise all their surroundings, because in their world it's normal, it's great. And I say I can't brag about it, and it's not okay to brag about it. It's not like I'm doing it for the purpose of pleasing somebody, or that somebody would like me. I'm doing it for me, it's mine, that's all. Why would anyone else want to see it and know it? And that's what everybody's always wondering about. And I also remember when a person of the 9th frequency could have told me 10 years ago, "Alex, what's the point? Now you bought this black t-shirt, black trousers, if you can't even see the logo and you spent so much money on it." I used to buy expensive clothes because quality is important, he says. Without a logo, it's stupid, money down the drain. You have to buy in such a way that you can at least see what you are paying for. And this acquaintance of mine bought clothes just to be able to see that he had jeans of a certain brand. He had a jumper of a certain brand. It was very funny. And I was the opposite. I had this approach. Why should I buy a Rolls Royce if I can just buy 2 or 3 Jeeps? If I need them for my summer house, for my family, instead of a Rolls Royce. And people see my Jeep and think that I am simple and ordinary. And those who see a Rolls Royce think that the person is super rich, and that means that he should be friends with him, not with Alex Korol. Although in fact I have much more opportunities than that man. But people judge by this vulgar cover. And that's a big mistake and a big misconception. The biggest mistake in society, in the world, is that people don't realize that frequency 9 is not a high frequency. Then I began to look for a golden mean. How could I be in the frequency of my heart, that is, so that my heart would not close, but at the same time be in the material world? I realized that it was as if there were 2 of me. There was creative Alex, where magic is, and there was material Alex. And all my life, I am in both worlds. And in the material world, I wrote one type of books. There is a completely different rhythm there. There must be discipline, structure, order, just like now. The way I am writing it to you now about frequencies, I am doing it now with my mind, because if I did not have the ability to write it all in the book, if I did not have such a life experience, I would not be able to explain it all to you. Because people who see all these worlds, all layers of society, who feel that there are these frequencies and sub-frequencies, they may feel it, those people who are creative, who are sensitive, who live with their heart in this corridor, but they cannot even put 2 words together to explain it. Do you know what it took for me to explain all my cosmic sensations? I had to live for a very long time in society so I could develop my mind and find the right examples. And now this scientific treatise, this memo, text, observation that I recorded 10 years ago, I'm writing all this to you so vividly, and all this now can easily set in your head, and you can see and understand it clearly, thanks to my life experience, material and social experience. I have felt it since childhood, and I have been trying to explain it all my life, and I kept gaining experience. And the more I had this experience, the more I traveled around the world, the more I encountered different layers of society, different people, the more I was able to find words to describe it all. And everything I did in life, it was all for the books, nothing else. I don't live for myself, I live for the books, for my writings. And even when I went to New York, I went only for the books, nothing else, only for the books. I didn't need New York, I didn't need America. I know that many people who are materialistic, who want to compete with everybody else, and they want to prove to each other who's cooler, who's better, who's richer, then naturally many people dream of going to live in America. I never had such a thought. It just so happened that I realized that I needed to go there, since I am now in search of the highest frequency.
And I had a task that I should start publishing all my books and translate them into English, which I am doing to this day.
This is social and material development. So if you are a photographer or a movie director or a musician, no matter how sensitive and magical you are, you still have to take into account all the material rules, and you have to develop one side in the material world. We all have two sides, left and right, or like front and back, whatever you want to call it. And I was developing myself spiritually to be able to go back into this cosmos, into this meditation, into this frequency without mind. But also I was learning to be on the material frequency, on the highest material frequency. And I was moving towards learning to be on both at the same time. And how is that? It turns out that it is necessary to combine one with the other. As an example, one of the rules of material frequency is that you should have all things modern and high quality, super high frequency. And the rule of the heart world, you should have everything according to your heart, what you want in terms of clothes and the rest of things. So you buy the creative thing only at the highest quality so that it's, let's say, Japanese cotton. So that's how this adaptation happens. And if you understand that in the material world people travel, or you want to go on a trip, then do it in such a way that it is both according to the frequency of the heart and the highest material frequency. Hence, go not to Miami, but go where the movie Twilight was made. Or where, let's say, Kurt Cobain lived. Me and my friends, we specifically went to the house where he lived. We were under the bridge where he often hung out. Then we were in Seattle, where he's buried. It was very interesting. Much more interesting than visiting pop, mainstream places. So your heart frequency, your creative frequency, is when you're against pop and against the mainstream. You don't want to be like everybody else, and you don't like pop. That is when you are a real creative person, when you're on the frequency of no mind, on the frequency of an angel. But in order for you not to sag materially, for you to have a material frequency too, you just need everything that you want in your heart, your creative cosmos, to be realized, materialized in the highest quality, at the highest level. What other observations can I share about frequencies? First of all, I noticed that all people have different, let's call it that, destinies. Don't be picky with words, though. In fact, I believe that only those people who live with a heart, who are part of God, who are connected to nature, have a destiny. They all have a destiny, and they are all destined to do what they do, and then they die. And then there are people who are kind of disconnected from God and nature, and they're on their own, kind of atheists. And that person, if he makes a mistake while driving, he's going to die today. His guardian angel is going to save him, and then there isn't some date when he has to die. He may die today or he may die tomorrow. It depends on him, because he has taken control of his own life. There are such people, I call them material, closed, who are disconnected from nature. Such people have no destiny. Destiny is when you are already under God. That's my point of view.
In this case, when I say that all people have their own destiny, I am talking about the fact that each person has his or her own life script, according to which he or she lives. All of you people are connected to something, and you are all connected to some kind of society. And it's different for all of you, this society. When I was still in contact with different people, now I am more of a recluse. But earlier, when I was 25 years old, when I was communicating with people, I was interested in who had what kind of life, who was afraid of what, who loved what, who was fond of what, who had what happened in life, who dreamed of what. I always wondered what a person's goal was, that is, what they wanted to become, what they were striving for. Okay, 99% of people I've met in my life who don't understand who they are and what they want, they don't even have a goal in life, but that's okay. But I also noticed that there is a separate category of people, for example, women who do not have a personal life. And I found it interesting that I noticed that they all have the same elements in their life. The way they dress, the way they look, the way they live their lives. I started to identify that. It's clear that they have a lot of these elements, but there are some common elements that were found in all of them. Let's say these women have cats at home, so that's one of the elements of the frequency of loneliness if a woman has a cat. Then there was music like Lana Del Rey. That's also when you're not family-oriented and single. For some reason, there was music like that. What I'm telling you here, it's as if I'm teasing you with this information, but naturally, I'm not going to give you huge lists of things here. Besides, they're always changing because society is also growing and changing. But I have described to you some general moments, and I noticed that these women who have no personal life, they dream about it and want it, but it does not work out for them. I noticed that they simply lead such a lifestyle and are surrounded by such elements, that is music, movies, clothes, animals, which connect them to this frequency of loneliness. Then I immediately became interested in looking at those women who have families, children, what elements they have. And I took that mold too, and I shared that mold with my readers who are single. And when they used this mold, for example, the list of elements, people started to be attracted to them at once. People started to call them for a date. Readers got warmth inside instead of coldness, which was in their soul. But there are many such frequencies. There is the frequency of man. It is also very unusual. I called it that. There are many men who are disrespected by everybody. Women avoid them, but not because of their appearance, but as if they feel that there is no male hormone in them. Men always insult them. And there are men who suffer from that. They don't have the male hormone. It's like they're such simpletons. I created a man's frequency. I called it man's frequency, in which there were prescribed recommendations that if you want to connect to the man's frequency, you need to go hunting, fishing, talk with men who work, as an example, in the police or do sports, go to the gym, listen to brutal music, watch brutal movies, military or movies with Jason Statham. You need to be interested in football. And when they started to do this, naturally, women started to be attracted to them. All men stopped insulting them. They started to be respected in queues and shops, and on the roads, and everywhere. It was as if their code had changed inside, and society, that is the system, began to build up towards them in a different way. There is a frequency love, and if you surround yourself with elements of the frequency of love, you start to fall in love with everybody, and everybody falls in love with you. There are many, many worlds, all of them are different frequencies. And there are people who have been in this frequency from birth, that is, they are connected to it. There are people who got there by accident, but naturally, none of the people know that these are frequencies, and no one has done it artificially. There is a material frequency, exactly a money frequency. You have a desire to work, and money come to you. And there is the opposite frequency, where there is no money. And as long as you are connected to this frequency, no matter what you do, no matter what business you open, or wherever you get a job, you see there are fields of activity where you have a fixed amount of money, how much you earn, and there are fields where it is not fixed. Let's say you're a realtor or a lawyer. There is not a fixed amount, and everything depends on the number of orders and clients and sales, how much in a month one would earn. And if you tap into the tangible monetary frequency, you're off the charts with the number of orders and referrals to you, and you have all the deals and you make a lot of money at once. That's how it works. Another one of the interesting observations was that there is a frequency of hell. And I even noticed that there is like the frequency of heaven, and there is the frequency of hell. And it's as if hell and heaven are all located here. So it's where we live. It's just some parallel worlds. It's just frequencies. And there are people who live in hell. Do you know what the frequency of hell is? It's when you're in school and you have a classmate hang himself in front of your eyes, and then your relative was raped. And there are people who have this in their lives very often, as if it's already the norm. And that's the frequency of hell. And such a paradox, I meet a person who is from the frequency of heaven. He is my age, and he has never had any tragedy in his life. He has never had any troubles. This person has never broken any limbs. And this man doesn't even know that there are evil people at all. He knows, of course, that there are people who swear, but he has never even swore. He just lives in a parallel world where everything is completely different. So hell and heaven are here. They are just frequencies. It is the frequency of society. It's such a plane. And there is hell and heaven. And these are all frequencies. And I noticed such a thing, that on this hell frequency there are criminals, murderers, maniacs, swindlers of all kinds. Everything is criminal there. But the most interesting thing is that they can't do any evil and they can't do anything bad if you are not in their sight, if you are not in their frequency. That was also one of my discoveries. Imagine such a picture, a subway station and a murderer. And I perceive such a person, if you want to see it through my eyes. For me, it is like a creation of God, and he's like a predatory animal. There are hawks and there are ducks. There is the duck, an innocent bird quacking, flying with the ducklings. And there is a hawk that hunts and slaughters these ducks and pecks them to death. And this hawk, he's not under the influence of any drugs. He was not indoctrinated into it, and nobody hurt him. He has no childhood trauma. So he plays this role by nature, like a villain who has to eat ducklings. But that's the animal world. And now let's go back to the human world. And it turns out that there are predators, predatory people, and the most interesting thing is that most of them are those who are born that way. That is not because life has spoiled them, they are born like that. They have such a need from childhood to kill everyone and everything. And imagine, such a killer stands at the exit of the subway in the evening and looks out for his victim. And different people come out of the underground, and he ignores one person, another. And there comes the person who stole his attention. So the one guy has stolen the attention of the murderer. And that's it. The murderer, since he's paid attention to him, he follows him. But why did the murderer pay attention to a particular person? Do you think because he looked at him with his mind and he didn't like some cap or bag of his? No, it's all down on the subtle plane. It's all about frequency. So that guy who was coming out of the subway, he was on the frequency of hell. And that's why the predator, who is operating in hell, because this is his world, the world of the predator. That's why he saw this guy in the subway, saw this student, and went after him to eat him. But if you're a decent, well-mannered person of high material frequency, and you have an open heart and you have virtues, but if you're a decent, well-mannered person of high material frequency, and you have an open heart, and you have virtues, and you have not sinned, and you have not offended anyone, then the murderer will never pay attention to you. This predator clearly knows and will never break this rule who to eat. Imagine that's the way nature works. And it turns out that the student who came out of the subway, he probably either cheated your mother on the internet or insulted your grandmother somewhere in the shop. Or maybe this person uses drugs, and drugs are evil because it immediately connects to the frequency of hell. So he's doing something bad. There's a scale naturally. One element of low frequency is not enough to connect to low frequency, that is to hell. To get to hell, he had to do a lot of bad deeds and surround himself with a lot of elements to be there. So it turns out that this man, who's the victim of a predator, is a bad guy himself. And that's why evil came after evil. That's how it works. And it turns out that Satan and these devils who serve him, they choose only those people who are sinful. I apologize that I use religious terms. I am just an orthodox man, a believer. It is easier for me to explain using those terms. That is why God specifically warns that you should not sin, otherwise you will go to hell. Do not sin, otherwise you will be eaten. And that's the way it is, because the devil will come for you. And the point is that if you do something sinful, like abusing food, alcohol, cigarettes, drugs, you hurt people, and you have a lot of anger, jealousy, a lot of vices in you, then the devils, demons are attracted to you, which begin to tempt you even more to close the light in you, to close your heart, so that you drown in this hell, and then you will be eaten there. And we live as if in a computer. It is a system, it works, there is no randomness. Everything is in order. And if suddenly a person is eaten by a maniac, it can't be an accident. And no matter how much you think that the person who is the victim, that he's good, it means you didn't know something about him. So he was doing something without letting you know. You just didn't know about it. And because of that, it depends on the soul. His soul gets dirty. He gets connected to the source of hell. Because of bad actions and deeds, and predators come to him to finish him off. And you see, when you know how the system works, how the world works, you are afraid to behave badly. For this reason, although I have always had it in my heart that I give more to people than to myself, that I am more modest, that I give everyone the best mug, the best place. So I've always had this approach. But it also explains what actions you do, not only what elements you are surrounded by, what you eat, what you listen to, and what you wear, but also your actions determine what you connect to. With good deeds, you are connected to heaven and attracted to it, and with bad deeds, you are attracted to hell and connected to it. And there is also a middle. It is such an earthly world in which people further determine where they will be pulled, down or up, left or right. There was one case, I also mentioned it in my books, I gave it as an example, when a boy my age argued with me. It was a long time ago. I was working on the topic of frequency. I was about 22 to 25 years old. This boy, his name is Sergey, said to me, "Alex, you should meet a friend of mine. He's a scientist. He's creating a perpetual motion machine. Maybe you'll be useful to each other." "Sergey," I said, "I'm sorry, but your scientist friend will never succeed. That is, he will never succeed in any achievement, and he will never succeed in perpetual motion." Naturally, Sergey is outraged at once, as is typical of all people of low frequencies. "What makes you think that? You don't even know him. I didn't even tell you his name. I didn't even show you his picture. How would you even know?" "Sergey, you don't understand. After all, you live in a certain frequency. And if it were a high-frequency scientist, he would not talk to you at all. I'm sorry, but it's true. And since you're communicating with him and he's communicating with you, that means he's of low frequency. And therefore, he's never going to succeed, so I don't even need to know him." Naturally, this upset Sergey, and I talked to many people in this way, expressed myself in this form, and it hurt and offended everyone. But I didn't want to offend anyone, and I didn't want anyone to like me. My goal was to always tell the truth. And yes, I see the world a little bit differently, more clearly, I would say. And you know, it's been almost 10 years, and there is no perpetual motion machine, and no scientist has invented anything. Why not? Because he's on a frequency where there is no success, no money, and no recognition. There is a whole separate frequency of success and stardom, and media and laurels. And only when you're on it will you succeed, and until you're on it, you won't succeed. And if a person of high frequency, that is from frequency 10, 11, 12, if from these three frequencies a person would tell me, or a person from the corridor frequency, this frequency spiritual, if from these frequencies, spiritual or from super high material frequencies, a person would say to me that, "I have an acquaintance who now wants to make an app that will be number one in the world on all iPhones and Androids," I would agree and say, "I believe it." And why would I say that? Because the person who was telling me about his acquaintance, he himself is from this world where success, money, and where there are no boundaries, where you walk out of your house and meet all the most brilliant people who are your neighbors. When you live in this frequency, you naturally cross paths with such people. And you have then and ideas of that level and scale, and then everything will work out. Everything is simple. This is how frequencies work. I also remember when I was working on the book Frequencies, when I was publishing the draft 10 years ago. I remember a long time ago a lot of readers wrote to me on social networks that there is a man abroad in the US who claims that if you show him one supernatural thing, like a superpower of some kind, if you show him and prove it to him, he will pay you $1 million. And there hasn't been a single person in all that time who has been able to pass his test, his trials. And I was asked by my readers how I can explain this. I said that it's a matter of frequencies, because a man, when he tests, let's say some psychic or magician, the man who's being tested, he switches off from his frequency of magic and connects to the frequency of that skeptic person who is testing him. So all miracles are switched off, that's the point. And to surprise that man who offers $1 million, a psychic has to prove it all and show it to the tester on his own territory, according to his own rules and his own appointed day. That is, you have to bend your own line. That man who does not believe in anything, who is a skeptic, and promises $1 million, it is necessary for him to switch to the frequency of this magic, psychoticism, etc. And then he will see everything and feel everything and get his proof. I'll tell you something else, something curious. People do not know, do not feel, and do not notice how the switching of frequencies takes place. But in fact, when a person grows and develops, his frequencies change. What is it? Suppose a person wants to learn to play musical instruments and to perform music. But when he studies and learns all notes and all instruments, and when he practices it all and immerses himself in this world, in essence, he connects to the musical frequency, and so then he broadcasts it. And everybody's psyche is different. And those people who have a hard time switching their attention from one rhythm to another, it is hard for them to study. And there are people who have a more flexible psyche, that is attention, and it is easier for that person to learn anything, including learning languages and so on. And here is a person who, as an example, is now not successful, not famous, and poor, and he's now trying to become successful, popular, rich. A crude example, of course, this is not the meaning of life. That is one of these vulgar desires of most ordinary people. So I take this as an example. And the man dreams of having everything, but he doesn't realize that to get it all, he needs to be on another frequency. He just got to the frequency where it is all. Do you know why some people don't get all these material things? It's because they don't let go of their old frequency. They want with their luggage, with their samovar, with their old elements, that is old friends, old things, with their old taste for food, for clothes, for everything. They want to get into the new world with their old things, but it can't happen. And it turns out that you have to let go of everything old, where there is no money and there is no success, and when there is nothing and you surround yourself with everything new of the high frequency that you want to get to, that you want to connect to. And some people have that work itself out in life by accident. You work, you go on a business trip, then bit by bit you are given more money. Because of that, you start to rent a better, more expensive flat in a better building. Then your relationship collapsed, and you have already chosen a slightly better person. It turns out you improve your quality of life. That is, you realize that maybe this time it is better not to go to Egypt for a month, but for this money it is better to go to Iceland for a week. And before you were low frequency, you were greedy, and you wanted to go to the warms and to afford maximum days of holiday for the money you have. And when you're older and growing up, you already choose a better holiday but fewer days. And let's say instead of flying to Turkey as an example, or to Egypt, and instead of flying there for a month, it is better to fly for the same money but for a week, as an example, to Mexico. For Russian people, this is an expensive holiday. Naturally, for Americans, it is a cheap holiday. But for Americans it means something else, something more exotic. But when I was developing and learning all these frequencies before I discovered the US, I forbade myself from everything that was at the level I was at. So I realized that why should I fly again to Phuket in Thailand when I can fly to Panama or Mexico? And why would I go to Finland again when I could go to Iceland? So I started to choose more exotic places and made a list that it was better to go to Mauritius as an example, that it is a high frequency place. Then I learned that there are the highest frequency resorts. But that was 10 years ago. At that time it was St. Thomas Island. There are some British islands, American islands. They're all next to each other there. And there is one St. Thomas Island. It's a very cool level, very high frequency place. And a lot of people from other countries don't even know that. They think the Maldives is cool. And actually Maldives is vulgar, and it's the people who are tasteless, who are pop, who are the victims of the mainstream. And individual personalities, high frequencies, which are above the 9 frequency, they will never go to the Maldives. When I was sorting out people around me, I noticed that when I communicated with Russian people who had not studied or lived abroad and had not traveled, it was as if they were lower frequency. And those people who have studied or lived abroad, it is as if they are more high frequency, as if they have less evil, they have more noble thoughts. I noticed this and made an analogy. I didn't choose them naturally by the categories that they lived abroad. It turned out later that all the people I selected by the code, they were of high frequency. They were almost all half Russian, I would call it that. So they had a more noble taste in everything, more restrained taste. They are more well-mannered, and unusually, I'll give you an example like this. I have a friend in Los Angeles. He's Armenian. He's lived there all his life, and he is of a very good high frequency. He's a good guy. And he always said how ashamed he is that he has Armenian acquaintances who live in the US. But for some reason, they didn't become Americans, and they still kept the same habits and still behave indecently. They walk around with guns, drive gold cars. That is what they are, and in Armenia, he says, there are a lot of people like that, and it's a pity that there are no people like me or like him. It's a real story, and I explained to him that it's normal. There are different worlds, there are different countries. Everyone goes through their own stage of development. And when I lived in New York, I came across Indians, Arabs, Chinese, who lived in the same house with me in New York, and they were super smart, super decent people. and I called them people of the world. It doesn't matter what nation you are, it matters what you're plugged into. Naturally, if I was born in Armenia, and in this society it's accepted when you have a white Mercedes, I would also want such a white Mercedes. There's nothing wrong with that, it's just the way society is. It's like every tribe has its own rituals, its own rules. And if I was born in Armenia, and then my parents sent me to London to study, then naturally I would dress more like a European, and I would want a completely different car, and I would probably look different. I would even have different facial features and hairstyles. And I noticed that in New York, at the time I lived there were a lot of people from all over the world who had outgrown, let's say, the country they were born in, and the fact that the boy was shy and ashamed of his Armenian acquaintances. I also said to him in response, "Do you think I'm not ashamed of Russian people? They come to New York and they are rude to people in the hotel in Times Square. They are dressed in colorful clothes, shouting out loud, 'Tagil,' and yelling, 'Borya, Natasha, come here,' haggling with everyone, pushing with angry faces, and all people immediately see that it's Russians coming, because they have angry eyes and no smile on their faces. There are such people, but of course not all of them, so the nation has no role in it. All countries went through different periods, bad or good. Everyone has a different experience of life. And naturally, if a person has such a destiny, and it's great for such a person, it doesn't matter if you're an Indian, Armenian, or Russian. If you've been playing hockey since you were 5 years old, and you often travel to America, to Canada, then you're already a man of the world. And you already have a completely different frequency, super high frequency, because you have been to high frequency countries. And you have a completely different taste, a different vision of the world. And there are people who are connected to different other frequencies, and there are people who are connected to low frequencies, and all countries also have frequencies. Many times this happened at school when I was studying. I remember there was a boy, also his name is Alex. He has a surname in B. I won't say it in full. Maybe he will read the book and he will show up in my life. And this boy, I remember, in the locker room at school in the 5th or 6th grade, he said to me, "Alex, you're not Russian." "What do you mean, not Russian?" "Well, you're an American." "Why am I American?" "Can't you see that?" "What?" "You're nothing like us." "What are you talking about?" I said. "How am I not like you?" "Well, look, you're the only one with long hair." And I had a haircut like in the movie Face Off with Nicolas Cage. He had a son named Adam. And I had a haircut like that when I was young. And everybody at school used to tell me, especially that boy Alex, "Alex, look, you've got long hair, you've got brightly colored trousers, some foreign jumpers." I'd come in green corduroy trousers, then I'd come in red. "Why?" I said. "All the kids in the movies look like that." "Yeah, but in American movies, all kids look like that." "Well, yeah. Well, you're not Russian at all. You don't look Russian." And because all the kids really at that time were dressed in all black, and I was dressed in all bright colors, they all had short haircuts, as if they were from an orphanage, or as if they were criminals. And I had long hair. It was very unusual. I was already listening to different music. I was already listening to Coldplay or Radiohead, and I liked MTV. And my parents always told me, "Alex, look at how the presenters on MTV dress, and you will always look stylish and fashionable, but don't look at your classmates." That's what they told me, especially my mother. And I was still noticing then, in my school days. Understandably, this was Russia. In all other countries, it was probably different. But imagine, 1997, I went to school in the 1st grade, and in 1998 to 2000, most of the kids were listening to Russian rock, and everybody was dressed like some kind of hobo bums. And I was of this frequency, energy, like in the movie with the Olsen sisters. There were a lot of movies like that. And I was more in touch with these kids who were like these girls, like in the movie It Takes Two. And we all looked so much alike. And the most interesting thing is that now almost all of them are not living in Russia, as it happens. And I also noticed back then at school that all these children had young parents. That is, those whose parents were old, aged. The children were of low frequency. And those whose parents were young, then the frequency was from the parents, modern. So the children were more modern. I even remember back then, imagine, I was still young. I had a friend, Ilya. He and I studied together from the 1st to the 5th grade. I was already telling him then, Listen, Ilya, you look so fashionable and always stylish, but your parents are of age. I mean, imagine, I already noticed it at the time. I was already thinking like that. I told him that I noticed that the fashionable guys are all stylish, fashionable, because their moms are young. And Ilya, my classmate, and his parents were very mature. And I said, since your parents are of age, why are you so stylish? How can that be? Where do you get these clothes from, and how did you realize that? So I have an older sister. Now I understand. That is, it even confirmed who this taste and style came from. All of this, in fact, is about time. The frequencies are time from the oldest to the most modern. All we see, all these frequencies, are time unfolded. And I noticed a long time ago that the low frequency is the old frequency, and the high frequency, where there are no troubles and everything is good, is the modern frequency, the frequency of the future. And there are people who are connected to the low frequencies, as if they stayed in the old times, but there are frequencies that are running out of time, and if you are connected to a frequency that is old and it is already fading away, you will fade away together with it. Everyone should take this into consideration and take it all into account. And the other thing that you can take note of that's interesting is that based on this understanding that there are frequencies, you can further now see what is real and what is fake. And because of the frequencies, I've always seen that. So as an example, let's say you admire some person on the internet and you think he is super rich. And I tell you that he is poor, and you start to argue with me. Why do I think that? I don't know this person. And I know what elements poor people have, what they eat, what they listen to, how they dress, how they look, how they behave. And I also know how people who are successful and rich behave. And from knowing that, I can see that this person is poor. So you believe that he was photographed in an expensive car, and maybe he bought it used for a low price. But I see that a person who is of high frequency or who is rich and successful, he would never dress like that or behave like that. I've always felt that. I've always seen that. Figuratively speaking, an unfavorable person of low frequencies, rustic, wild, with sins. He thinks it's cool if you dressed in Philip Plain clothes with skulls, went on holiday in the Maldives and bought yourself a Geländewagen. Although this is how the lowest frequency rustic people behave, they prefer it. And a high frequency person will never buy such clothes. He will dress completely differently. He will wear James' purse as an example. Although there are a lot of high frequencies, as I say, there are more sub-levels. There's, let's say, an RRL brand. There are high-frequency people who like that kind of cowboy stuff. And those people in Los Angeles who like that kind of style can still buy themselves, as an example, a Ford Bronco, an old one with round headlights. That's a high-frequency person. And a low-frequency person doesn't know what a Ford Bronco is. He thinks that it is cool to be so colorful, all in gold, that it is good. I've never called myself a psychic because it's a very shameful word. Because according to statistics, that is, according to frequencies, if you look at all the people who call themselves psychics, they are low-frequency people, insecure, lost, unfavorable, who just want money and they are off the track. These are the kind of lost people. I don't mean to insult them in any way, they're going through their own stage of development. But just to make you understand that such a social layer of society calls itself psychics. But these people don't know how to do anything and can't do anything, and they themselves have a lot of problems. I have always told my readers that if you are interested in something spiritual and esoteric, it is easier for you to turn to a super high-frequency person, some world-class person or some successful journalist or businessman or banker or a person who has a chain of restaurants. Believe me, he will give you much more correct, useful advice than some village upstart psychic who has labeled himself as such. But knowing what frequencies are, and knowing what attention control is, and these two works, these two draft books I was writing just then, when I was still 20 years old. And I worked on these two discoveries, and I'm still working on them to this day. And knowing the attention control and frequencies, on the basis of this you can explain whether this psychic, whether this spirituality, which has become very fashionable now in the last 5 years in the world, exists. It actually does not exist as everyone imagines it. That is, there are no miracles. It all can be explained scientifically, that's it. And so I wondered why there are people who get real meditation, and why there are people who don't. And I was just describing what a meditation is in my draft books, Frequencies and Attention Control. I tried to explain 10 years ago that for meditation to work, it's not enough that you just meditate. It's important what frequency you're on. And that meditation, chakras, energy management, and all this magic that people like, it's all there, but it's all at the frequency of creativity, at the frequency of the heart. When you have your mind switched off, when you're so languid, when you're one with yourself, when you go to all kinds of places of power, temples, listen to languid music like Massive Attack, Uncle, Tom York. And when you're on that languid frequency, like the Twilight frequency, it's like you're in the movie Twilight. When you're like that, that's when you get meditation. And when I published a rough draft of my book on the internet and talked about how to first plug yourself into that frequency without mind. And when people did that, their heart switched on, their mind switched off. When they started to meditate, they got meditation. They really got meditation. And when a person is clothed in material, when he is on an active, agitated rhythm, when he is always thinking, always evaluating, always controlling, as long as he's on this frequency, he doesn't feel himself or people. He cannot meditate, he cannot feel energy, he cannot feel any chakras. So everything exists in the world and everything is possible. It's just that it's all in different frequencies. And your favorite phrase, to your liking, not to your liking. You can't trust it. To your liking is that which is true according to your inner feelings, something you want and do not want. But before that, you have to be convinced what you are connected to your heart or to your mind, to the material source or to the spiritual source. And in addition to that, you have to be convinced whether you are connected to your spiritual or material source or to a stranger with whom you have been talking today and yesterday. It's also very life-affecting and influential. And if I, let's say, now sit down to meditate and I don't succeed, it's because I'm on the frequency where there is no meditation. So I need to go to that frequency of meditation first, and then meditation will happen. And that means I need to watch movies like Knocking on Heaven's Door, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, Fight Club, Angel A, Powder, Donnie Darko. And when you watch such languid movies and then listen to Tom York's languid music, it's as if a lens inside you turns and your mind turns off and your heart turns on. And only when your heart is switched on can you have meditation, because only then can the light come into you. And it's like there's this thing that there are some actions, deeds, elements that turn your lens to the material world, to the material frequency you're connected to. And there are some elements, actions that on the contrary, turn your lens so that your soul is connected to the heart. And when I am, let's say, living in the heart, and there are always tests and checks for each of us, and if suddenly now someone will deceive me, or someone will argue and fight with me, and I am in the heart frequency, then if I react and start arguing with him, then my heart will close, and the mind will switch on, and I will be connected to the frequency of the mind. So you can lose the frequency of the heart and the magic, and switch to the frequency of the mind. And that's it. All the miracles are gone, and the mind will switch on, where you're only evaluating, always thinking. Thoughts can't be stopped, garbage in your head, and on it goes. But it's all in the world, in our life. Everything is not accidental. It's all a big school in which we live, where our soul, which consists of two parts, is polished. Our soul consists of heart and mind, and we connect to the frequency of the heart, and our heart is developed. Then we connect to the frequency of the mind, and our mind is developed. And so we are developing. And it is possible to develop spiritually, to go to the very top. And it is possible to develop materially with the mind. And all these are frequencies. That is, it turns out that there are two parallel worlds, spiritual and material. But besides the spiritual and material worlds, there are sub-levels. There are different spiritual worlds, that is, sub-frequencies. And there are different material worlds from low to high. Naturally, someone will now read and understand all this information and think about how to change the frequency to a more favorable one. And what you should take note of is that, first of all, in order to completely connect to another frequency, you must completely disconnect from the old frequency. You can't be 50-50, it's not going to work. And I will tell you different stories when, as an example, some friend, acquaintance, or relative of mine try to change his frequency under my supervision. And what I have seen, I will share here. I have noticed an interesting thing. A person has a high-frequency music playlist from me. He has started with the simplest things. He has taken my high-frequency movies, music, clothes, and he's surprised that for some reason nothing happened. That is, he does not understand whether he is connected or not. He thinks that he's probably connected because he's dressed differently, the music is different. But actually, when you're connected, it's like another life. You can't confuse it with anything. It's like, wow. It's like you've died and been reborn. That's how it feels psychologically. And many people thought that once you changed your clothes, switched on a different playlist, and that's it, you're probably on a different frequency. But the person was still on that frequency. Why is that? There's a percentage ratio at work here. That is, if I am now connected to frequency 5 and I want to switch to frequency 6, that I need, and this is like a scale, to take into account the fact that I need to remove all elements of frequency 5 from my life and replace them with elements of frequency 6. Not just remove them, but replace them. It's very important. And if I have replaced only 30%, then it turns out that 30% is not enough elements of the new frequency, because you still have 70% of the old frequency, that is frequency 5. And it means that you are still connected to it. And to disconnect from frequency 5 and switch to frequency 6, you need to have at least 45% of the old frequency elements and 55% of the new frequency, frequency 6. And only then the scales will be outweighed, and there will be a real switching, and this switching cannot be confused with anything. And many people who are even outsiders, just readers, who even 10 years ago read my book Frequencies. I also talked about this in the book Corridor, which is my first published book, which came out in 2018, where I also talk about all these social stratas of society, all these frequencies in great detail, about how society works. And I say that I live in a corridor and people all live in these worlds. There, I give also examples there, that of low frequency, that of high frequency. So take note, whoever is interested, it's the book Corridor in the orange cover. As it turns out, I noticed that when people read the book Corridor, and when they read the draft of the book Frequencies, they changed only those things that were convenient for them. But they did not change what they did not want, and that is why they did not succeed. And I will say this, it is almost impossible for a person to change himself, that is, to switch off from a frequency and to switch to another frequency. A man cannot do it himself. I will tell you why. When a person is on his frequency, figuratively speaking 5, this is you, this is your world. And to completely disconnect from it, that is to go against it, to throw away all these rules, elements, and surround yourself with a 6th world. You will not be able to do that because your mind will resist, because your mind is connected to society. And it's like destroying yourself, that is what you will think. And the mind will try to deceive you. So let's say in order for you to have a new frequency 6, you need to delete all your social media, all your contacts, recreate new ones as an example. And your mind will say, come on, you already have new social networks, just change your avatar to a high frequency avatar and that will do. And you'll feel like you've completed the task, but in fact your mind has tricked you. And the same with music, instead of getting rid of your old music and deleting all of it, you didn't delete it anyway, but you saved it somewhere just in case. And this is what you have kept of your old world, that is, you don't let it go. And so people cannot switch off from the old frequency and switch to a new one. But sometimes life gives you a chance to switch. It's when you get into a corridor. That is when you live in frequency 5, and suddenly you are knocked out of it. A woman left you or a man left you, and you went into yourself, that is, you went into the corridor. This is a state without mind, without society. You have switched off from it, and at this moment, while you stay in this corridor, you can then return not to your frequency 5, but to another frequency, to frequency 6. And it turns out that in order to get to some other frequency, you have to go into the corridor first, and only when you go into the corridor, you can enter the next door, some other door from the corridor. So you cannot go from world to world. You can't go from the world of 5 to the world of 12. You have to go from the world of 5 to the world of 0, that is, to the corridor, and then from this 0, you can go to another material frequency. And in the corridor, there live angels that you come across on your way. Angels who show you life from the outside, so that you rethink how everything was in your world 5. Then they hint to you that there is the next stage, you can go there. You're always offered a naturally better world, and you either agree, listen, or go back to your old one until the next time you get into trouble, until you are once again thrown into your own world, which you have returned to until you are thrown again. And there are people who live in World 5. They have troubles or some shocking situations. They get into the corridor, read my books, watch movies that I recommend, cry, live with heart, walk around with a photo camera, enjoy life. And then they close up again, return to their world of 5, where all is not well with them. Someone once again offends them, they get into the corridor again. And there are people who live like that. And there are people who got into the corridor and took this chance, and after this corridor they switched to a higher frequency. I will also say this, if we talk about frequencies, that there is one particular big frequency, which is also divided into sublevels. This is society. It's all these show-offs in social networks, newspapers, everywhere, bloggers of all kinds. That's the society. And there are such show-offs in every city, and the highest frequencies are when you have your own individual, personal frequency. That's what high frequency is. You won't meet such people almost anywhere. They are invisible. And they are not subject to herd behavior. That is, these people will never run to a new restaurant just to show off. And these people will not brag about what they bought. Such people will never post a picture with their close friends. Because they are close and dear friends, dear people. They will not flush them down the toilet and publish them in social networks. So to understand how the world works, I've covered that in all my books. The book Attention Control, it's all about how to connect and switch. The book Frequencies, which I'm writing now, it's like a little treatise, it's all about frequencies. Although before that I have already wrote and explained it in detail in the published book Corridor. The book Have Not Charity is about sins and virtues, is also about all this, about attention and frequencies. Because if you do bad deeds, you connect to hell. When you do good deeds, you connect to heaven. And when I wrote the rough draft of my book Frequencies about this 10 years ago, I didn't take that into account. I noticed that all people are surrounded by different elements, that is, preferences, establishments, restaurants, shops, brands, music, movies. And who's on what frequency, that's what they choose. But in addition to this, which I can add now from the new perspective that I have noticed it, felt it, and could not explain, that actions also influence what frequency we connect to. So you can live in a super decent house and listen to good music, but if you do bad deeds, sinful deeds, it fuels your sins. And sins are also frequencies, and you are connected to hell. Everything bad is attracted to you. And if you do good deeds, which feed and nurture virtues in you, that are good qualities, then you are connected to higher frequencies. You are closer to heaven. And people thought that if you changed your clothes, changed your music, playlist, or rented an expensive flat in New York, it is enough. But it's not enough. It's also important how you behave, your behavior, your intentions, your actions. And if you watch some pornography at night, if you use drugs, then no matter how expensive you dress or how high quality your clothes are, no matter how expensive luxury trips you allow yourself, you still blacken your soul and lower your vibrations. So it is very important to watch your actions, and people think it is not important. And in an interesting way, there are cities of angels. You could call them angel cities. What is it? There are countries and cities in which there are very few social strata of society, that is, very few frequencies. Let's say I come to Finland, it borders my hometown of St. Petersburg. If I come to Finland, Helsinki, I haven't been there for a long time, but what I notice is that it will be very boring there, not interesting, because there are few frequencies there. There is one frequency there. It's decent Finns, that is, men of such sporty build with a haircut like an Oxford or Harvard student, and in such discreet clothes. The women are chubby, kind, blonde, and their children. And they're all in these cars that have a long rear with a boot. That's their frequency. There are people like that. There's another frequency, rockers like. They won first place at Eurovision once. They're band lordy. And there are some people out there who like that kind of music. And they are all like this, men with beards, and this beard with rubber bands, braids, all Vikings-like, with piercings, tattoos. And then there's these guys, and that's it. Boring. And when people ask me what cities I could live in, I said that I need something like that, you know? There are small airports, and there are big global airports where all worlds intersect. I'm interested in something like that. And I said that in this respect I am happy with St. Petersburg. And why St. Petersburg? Because here, which is unusual, in St. Petersburg, Russia, all social strata of society are represented. That is, all frequencies. There are lunatics, maniacs, billionaires, stars, creative people, people from some Tsar's times, and some of the opposites. Ill-mannered, wild. That is, there are different people, all of them. It is very interesting. A city of angels. And I also gave New York as an example, of course. I compared it to St. Petersburg, and I say that New York fits as well. It's a city you can walk around forever, and the people are the same, only in St. Petersburg, of course, people are not from all over the world. St. Petersburg, it's still such a city, it is still growing and developing, and will be like New York in the future, I'm sure of it. We have people from all over Russia there in St. Petersburg. And New York, it has people from all over the world. So it's like a big version of St. Petersburg. And when I lived in New York, I loved that I met people from all over the world. All walks of life, all frequencies. That's what I noticed, that New York has all frequencies. You'll find a chess fan there, you'll find an unusual person who believes in aliens. You'll find a super rich person, a super creative person. Everything is there, all people, all worlds. I like New York a lot. I mean, of course, I really like Oregon and Washington State, and all the small towns like Portland. But they're small, there's not a lot of those frequencies there. They're nice, very beautiful nature, and I like that misty forest. But to live and develop, the New York is suitable because there are so many frequencies. And there are such cities of angels. Why? Because angels will feel free only in such cities, not like a lion in a cage. And if an angel is placed in some small town in Europe, in some Prague or Helsinki, the angel there will simply die. Because it is like putting a panther in a small cage. It will not be able to run. It will just get sick. An angel should not be tied to anything, it should fly. They are the ones who live in the corridor, so it has to be metropolitan cities. London fits too. Of course it is small, but everything is gathered there from all over the world. And all the frequencies are present in London. You can take note. I'm doing a certain technique on purpose right now. I'm writing it all now and inserting the New York City code into the text. Can you imagine? I'm putting it in this book, in this story, in these frequencies. And it was shown well in the movie School of Rock with Jack Black. He showed kids back then that imagine when you hate someone and then play it. And the point is, that's how you can lay down those emotions. When you're painting a picture of something, you can convey that code, that emotion. When you lost someone or fell in love with someone, and a picture may depict one thing, but the code is quite different, which people on the subtle plane feel. This is very important to know. Now I have made it so that I connect it to the frequency of New York, and it seems that I give information about frequencies, but with the code, that is with the energy, the frequency of New York. And those people who are sensitive and creative, they should feel it. I'm doing it for the first time. I haven't approached it that way on purpose. I have so much information, and this has been going on for over a decade, and there is so much information that you could write books for the rest of your life. And this information will never run out. And that's how I put the code into the text. Now think about something else. You can watch a nice show on YouTube, an interesting show, but the code can be very bad because the person who made the show has a bad code. And he may have a good show, but after this show, which is about traveling, after that you become insecure or irritated. And in fact, his inner code is transmitted to you. And now a lot of unfavorable bloggers have taken your attention to themselves, turned your attention to themselves. And you watch something entertaining or interesting, and then you wonder why you feel bad, and you are irritated, or you're not sure of yourself, or your mood is bad. And this is broadcast from those people. They have a very bad code. And now through the internet, not a noble, high-frequency code is broadcasted to the whole world, as it used to be, but a low one. It's very much related to frequencies, take note. In the past, only honored artists and really successful people who had passed all the right stages of development, musicians, actors, they went through all this, and then they were given such a decent, honest opportunity to appear on the screens or in rotation on the radio. And then it was broadcasted to people, and that's why people felt good and were drawn to these high frequencies. People felt inspired by the creativity that was being poured into their ears through radio stations or through television. And when the internet came along, all the most unsavory people from hell took over. They started taking over the airwaves on social media. Your attention shifted to that, and you plugged into hell. Can you imagine the whole world plugged into hell? That's why there's such hell in the world right now. And people have bad moods, suicidal thoughts. Everybody's irritated, everybody's angry, everybody's insecure. And this has become so strong that even successful high-frequency people have started to fall under this influence because they are also in social networks, and people of unfavorable frequencies took power over the world. Since people do not know what frequencies are, and authorities do not know what frequencies are, it is not controlled in any way, and now there is such lawlessness in the world, and it is urgent to restore order. I'm nobody. I'm just a writer. You're just regular people too. Thank you for believing in me, for reading my books, thank you. But at least for you, take note now that through these social networks, news, and all this energy, this code of low frequencies influences you. And if you remember, just 5 years ago, remember how you felt in your soul, how much lightness and freedom and desire to live you had. And how have you been feeling lately? Notice. And now think about it, and who did it? Who shat in your soul? Now you need to control this movement too. Now you need to take into account what social networks you are in, and who's in front of you, who catches your eye. Because this is the reason for such a broadcast to you. And even if you avoid social networks and all these bloggers, your environment is still influenced, and through your environment, this wave of low frequencies will still reach you. It turns out that you can't hide from it until something in the world changes globally for the better, and all these frequencies. The most interesting thing to take note of is that there are many of these frequencies. They have sources. Initially, there is a source. It is a living person. And from him it spreads so that all people are connected to him, and all people to people, and this frequency spreads. And like that, there are many frequencies. There are 24 elders. You can imagine it like this, if you compare it with the Bible. So it's like the 24 gods, 12 of one side, 12 of the other side, like time. And it's all frequencies. And the point is that there is some chaos going on right now, some rearrangement of all this stuff in the world. In order to control this, I try not to communicate with anyone, not to let anyone near me, not to use social networks, not even to switch on YouTube because I feel unfavorable, low-frequency radiation coming from there. And I try to continue to surround myself with high-frequency elements as much as possible, to surround myself with high-frequency people who are not influenced by this hell. I try to continue to do noble deeds, because one of the things that always fuels the heart and turns on virtues and makes you high-frequency noble is diligence. So no matter how tired I feel, how not tired I feel, I continue to work, and nothing else, no entertainment. Entertainment my conscience does not allow me. I have forgotten when I had a holiday. I keep wanting to allow it to myself, but I can't. I have to work. Hard work and eternal desire to study and work. It protects you from all temptations, from all sins, and keeps you on a good frequency that you are safe. It brings you closer, as it were, to God. I would also add about the percentage of frequencies. As I said earlier, if I'm on frequency 5 and I want to switch to frequency 6, I need to have at least 50% of the elements of the frequency 6. And then the scales will tip and I will switch to the new high frequency. Now I will explain further. If I'm on a super high frequency and everything consists of these elements, that is my environment, actions, house, flat, people, work, everything is of this high frequency. If I allow myself something of low frequency, as an example, I will buy a hookah, and I think that a hookah is a low frequency. So people who had troubles, I noticed that one of the elements was, they liked hookah. And if I allow myself living in New York in a skyscraper, living in an apartment, to smoke hookah wearing James Spears clothing, or there's a brand like Pilgrim Surf Supply, or a brand like Kith, or a brand like Noah. These are all Japanese and American brands. If I allow myself to smoke a hookah in those clothes, in a high-frequency neighborhood, in a high-frequency house, it's not going to hook me up on a low frequency because it's only 1%. It's not going to overtake me. And it turns out that I can afford something low frequency, even 5%, even 10%, and it won't tune me into the low frequency if it's just a little bit. Everybody has that just a little bit of wiggle space. So if you meet high frequency people, you may see and be surprised that they have a low frequency element. So they have it 1%, it doesn't throw them over. That's how it works. And if you have 51% high frequency and you see a low frequency person today, you will immediately switch to the low frequency because you are closer to that edge of low and high. That's why you should always strengthen your high frequency. That is why many high frequency people lead such a correct way of life for a reason. What they eat, what they listen to, with whom they communicate, how they live, what they prefer, buy, collect something. These are all elements that strengthen their frequency. And so you need to strengthen your world, your frequency, and always try to go up and forward. I don't know why it so happens that my intelligence and my high level of efficiency and my deep view in the world somehow crosses with people who are interested in esotericism and psychics. Because I have never been interested in esotericism and psychics, and a little bit even despised it because it is not a very high frequency. But it so happened that most of the readers I had more than 10 years ago are all esotericists. That is, people who like all kinds of paranormal things. And I, an adequate guy, look crookedly at such people who dress up as sorts of shamans. It is for me such a But I will indulge your curiosity now in terms of esotericism, because on the basis of understanding what is attention control, and on the basis of understanding what are frequencies, you can explain all kinds of paranormal things too.
One of the things I gave you an example of why some people get meditation and some people don't.
I told you what doing harm is in magic, thanks to frequencies, how this is done. When someone puts a negative spoil on someone, in essence, you just connect the person to a low frequency, and that's why troubles are attracted to him. And also vice versa, a person who surrounds himself with good elements, he can have good luck. If based on the topic of frequency, we touch upon something esoteric, like energy control, chakras, and all that. Let's imagine that you are in Japan, as an example, and I am in New York. You know, there are all kinds of techniques when esotericists can, as an example, transfer heat, energy, and switch on chakra. And let's imagine that you are in Japan and I am in New York, and I can switch on your chakras. You start to feel, for example, your third eye. Those of you who have felt it, you know what it is. And let's say I can do it, no matter where you are, anywhere in the world. But I can't do it without your knowledge, because now we're talking about frequencies, and it's about frequencies. So for me to be able to influence you, I need you to be connected to the same frequency that I'm connected to, or rather that I created. It's all like radio stations, like radio receivers, so I need you as an example to be connected to frequency 357. And if you will connect to the frequency 357, which I will create and will be on the frequency 357, then everything I will think and everything that I will do, you will have the same thoughts in your head, and you will also feel what I will feel. That is, all sensations will be transmitted to you. And if I feel hot, you will feel hot. How does it work? Suppose you are in Japan. I want to demonstrate this to you. I have to bend my line 5 times. So I'll tell you how to sit down, and I will tell you to pour a glass of water, turn on some songs. And from the fact that you will do as I tell you in the sequence, you will be connected to the frequency that I have set by giving you these 5 instructions. It can be elementary things, anything, just 5 actions. As an example, cut out a snowflake and put it next to your left hand, and pour a glass of water and put it next to your right hand, and put some Tom York song on loop. I do that, and you do that at the same time, and from that we are all connected to the same frequency. And after that I start, as an example, to switch on my heart chakra so that my chest burns, and you automatically start to feel it. That's how it works. It's basic and simple.
And I knew how to do it before I knew what frequencies were.
Because then I had empathy. I felt people.
And it always turned out that someone either felt me or I felt someone, and I didn't understand why, and it all happened by accident.
And then I realized why it was like that. Some of my books that people read, not all of them, of course, but there are books that really make people feel. They feel differently after these books. It's because they have a switching off frequencies. When you watch some movies, listen to some music, you always connect to something or disconnect from something. It's normal. And if a person reads my book, Alternative History, he's connected to one frequency. If he reads the book 3 Paradoxes of a Creative Person, he's connected to another frequency. And if he reads other books, treatises, he connects to other frequencies. They are all different frequencies. They are all embedded like that. I want to add more detail from observations. I have mentioned this many times before. This is about icons. There are orthodox icons and there are antiques icons. And if I'm super high frequency and I take some kind of icon that was prayed at for a long time, a charged icon, it will fulfill the function of radiating the spiritual energy of that prayer, like places of power and temples. That's great. But if you study all strata of society, people who keep icons and prefer them, they are people of very unfavorable life. If you look at it materially as frequencies, the icon itself is of low frequency element, although it is a source of spiritual energy, the way it is charged. But the object itself is of low frequency. And if you are of low frequency and you buy yourself an antique icon, it will feed your low frequency, and it will connect you even more to something negative, which can cause trouble. It's such a paradox. And if you are of high frequency, material person, and you buy yourself this icon, it will not overbalance the scale. That is, it is an element will not be able to pull you to hell. But at the same time, it will fulfill the function for which you bought it, that it is prayed and spiritual energy comes from it. This is already such subtleties and complexities that people will find it hard to understand. It turns out that if I am poor and live in a communal flat, and I go to church, it will connect me even more to the beggar frequency, where maybe I will be beaten on the head in the street, even though you went to the holy place. And if I keep everything in balance, I mean I'm on a high frequency, super modern, I have a Steam Deck, virtual glasses, I'm wearing super modern cool brands, I live in a modern flat with modern renovations, and I decided on top of that to get in touch with something antique and to go to Orthodox Christian church, then everything is in balance. And I charged myself there with energy there, everything is great. But as elements of material frequency, icons and churches do not unbalance me. That's something to take note of. Of course, not everyone will understand it. I know it in advance, but then you will understand it when it happens. Still, an element of high or good frequency can be tarnished. How is it? Suppose I listen to some musical band that is not visible in society and people do not know it and do not listen to it. Only high-frequency people with unique tastes know it, and there are only a few such people in the world. And I listened to this band, and suddenly this band became mainstream. And from the moment it becomes mainstream, I will immediately turn away from this music band, because no matter what it is, if unfavorable people are connected to it, then if I listen to it, I will be connected to the society that is connected to it. And it can be that I can wear some brand of clothes. As an example, in 2016 in Russia, not many people knew, it came to Russia later. I knew the brand Vetman, and then I was already wearing it at 25 years old. And then only after a year or two, in Russia the most developed people started to buy this brand. People who go abroad, who have taste. It was still possible to wear it. And when everyone started buying the brand, all sorts of ungenerous bloggers who just wanted to show off, they just bought the most expensive jacket they could without knowing. And when they started dressing up like clowns, like a circus, the brand was immediately vilified. Consequently, it ceased to fulfill the function of high frequency. I had to throw the clothes of that brand away, or wear it only to take out the garbage or to walk the dog. And it turns out that high frequencies are those brands that are not denigrated. Naturally, this doesn't apply to everything. Of course, you can pick on it now and say, "What do you say about iPhones? Everybody uses them." I'm telling you, there's a percentage. I take that all into account. There are individual, particular things, and I prefer, before all the unfavorable upstarts get to that point, I like a brand, for example, Saint Laurent. And a long time ago, I used to like Maison Margiela. But when he made these shoes with 2 toes, all kinds of people started wearing them, and especially these bloggers, and they found out about that brand because of that, and it got a little bit tarnished. I also used to like, 10 years ago, Comme des Garçons. It was one of my high-frequency brands when nobody knew it. Its biggest high-end collection was black clothing. I really liked it, made in Japan, of good quality. And then they did an affordable, cheap heart collection, and everybody started wearing these heart sneakers. And that was it. That brand went downhill. And so it is with watch brands. I noticed 10 years ago, now I don't know. I try not to look at society. So everything I am telling you is an analysis of society from 10 years ago. I studied it then, when I was working on my book, on these materials, and then I didn't pay much attention to it. But 10 years ago, I noticed that rich men, but of low frequency, who are not of blue blood, have Hublot watches. Those are rich men, but of low frequency. Wild, he has an Hublot watch. And the one who's noble, he has a small watch, classic, like grandfather's Patek Philippe. And who's of low frequency, he buys himself some show-off car, a leather jacket, some Philippe Plain, and Hublot watch. And this is considered low frequency. And who is more noble, he has everything more modest and refined, though 1,000 times more expensive. But only people like him or like me know that. And people of all frequencies, from 1 to 9, naturally, they will not notice the one with the Patek Philippe watch, the modest man in James Pierce clothes, but the show-off one in crocodile leather jacket with Hublot watch on a Geländewagen or Rolls Royce. Everyone will pay attention to him, and they will think that he's cool, but it is a delusion. From what I will add, what is considered low frequency? Of course, I have nothing against Nike. They're a great brand from the mass market, from the mainstream, from everything that's worth buying. They're great in sneakers, they're a whole empire. But now, in the last 2 years or so, all the people who are low frequency, who are in the most pop society, are exposed to this unconscious fashion. That is, fashion is unconsciousness. And these people all started wearing Nike sneakers. You've seen them. These black and white or green and white. And now everybody's wearing them, girls and guys. And everyone who falls under this wave, it can be immediately concluded that this person is unconscious, that he's not a personality, not an individual, that he's not from the frequency of angels. He's of the frequency of people, and even of low frequency, but of the most general frequency, where everything is common, identical, public. And if I see a man in such sneakers, it is clear. I can immediately conclude who he is and what he is. And so often it is possible to identify people who is exposed to what, because at each frequency people have their own preferences. Thanks to these elements, it is easy to understand each person. As an example, if my sister and some classmate come to visit, I will ask her classmate, what do you watch? What movies or TV series? And I will look at the way she is dressed, and she will say that she watches the TV series Euphoria, and then she will say that she likes the movie The Dreamers. Then I will immediately conclude that she is, a girl of easy virtue, and she is an addict. Because only drug addicts and women of easy virtue who are into lust, they prefer the series Euphoria, which is on Netflix, and they prefer The Dreamers. These are all statistics. If I was approached by some intelligence services, I would quickly go through each world with my attention in a month, and I would give out everything about each frequency, about everyone. But there's something else that would be interesting to those who are interested in esotericism, but would also probably be of interest to the intelligence services. How can you find any person? Because every person is on some frequency, and it turns out that if you're connected to his frequency, then you, walking along the street according to your soul, and your soul is connected to the frequency of the person you are looking for, you will start to enter those establishments, those shops, and walk those streets where that person walks. And you will meet him in the near future. And I have checked this in practice 1,000 times. And that's why people wondered how I could find them. So I didn't do it with my mind. I don't need to follow anyone. It is enough for me just to think about this person. If I am zero, if I am without mind and connect to his frequency, I will see through his eyes what he sees. I will be interested in what he is interested in. Therefore, I know everything about him. Even how he feels when he sits in his chair, and what his attention steals when he walks down the street. I know it right away because I'm tapped into his frequency. And it turns out that I can simply connect to his frequency. Every day I can walk on the street or drive a car to those places that I just want to go to. And in fact, he's connected to the same source. And therefore, I will end up where he is, and we will cross each other. And here you have one of my scientific proofs. And one of my other proofs is why you suddenly remembered someone. It often happens with you people. You remembered about a person, and tomorrow by chance you met him, or today you met him. How's that? Miracles. So because you connected to his frequency or he to yours, this intersection happened, and then it happened physically. That's it. I want you to take note that there are a lot of traps in this system we live in this world. And it turns out that when you are strengthened on your frequency, you live in it, everything is great. But if suddenly there is some crack in your world, something happens, some emergency, and you become a little bit disconnected from this society with your attention, and consequently, because of this, you become disconnected from your frequency. Because of this, you start to look around for different things. It doesn't matter where you look, on the internet or in real life. Now you can also use the internet as an example. It happens that when a person has everything smooth in his personal life, in work, in hobbies, and creativity, you're busy with this and that's it. It can't get close to you. Your attention is occupied. This is security. And if it happens that your attention is somehow shaken, today some emergency happened and you decided to go for a walk in the street, to walk around, or to surf the internet, to see who is subscribed to you, who is watching you in social networks. And at that moment, you can cross, well, you have one foot in the corridor, one foot in your world, because of some emergency. And in addition of being in a good world, you can also be in a bad world. You could be under a bad influence at that moment, because dark people can also hunt for you. That is sinful demons, tempters. And it turns out that when, as an example, a boy leaves a girl, the girl cries. And she has some acquaintances, friends or strangers, and other acquaintances of different kinds. And suppose I say to her, "Cheer up, watch a good movie about love, go see your mom. Naturally, don't drink under any circumstances." So I tell her that, and her other friend or girlfriend starts telling her, "Forget about him, you need to get your mind off him, let's go to a nightclub." And they start offering her alcohol, drugs, and bad boys. And you're at a crossroads right now. I mean, the corridor is like a crossroads, and you're like choosing which world you're going to go to next. If you take a wrong turn, that's how you get into this hell, and the door will close until the next emergency. And you'll be in this for a year, where all the sinful people are. So you have to be careful, even when you suddenly fall down, lose yourself. Somehow at a crossroads, your world is collapsing. Never allow yourself to let this weakness take over under any circumstances. That is why it is the most foolish mistake when someone suggests going somewhere to take your mind off things. I'll never forget an incident. I had a childhood friend, Seraphima. We knew each other a long, long time ago. She was a good girl, and she doesn't even know what happened to her, and that her heart had been turned off for a long time, and that her demons just ate her morally. She got involved with a guy who was a drug addict. This guy was beating her, scolding her. They were fighting about something all the time, and all sorts of bad stuff like that happened. And naturally, I rarely started to see her because of the fact that she got into such a world. How she got there is another question. And then she was influenced by this guy, and suddenly her personal life collapsed. We met because her heart opened up, and I told her, "Listen, Seema, don't build any relationships right now. You don't need any boyfriends. Don't go to any clubs. Do not drink. Drinking alcohol is bad, especially with people you don't know. Don't do it. It's your own fault for letting such a jerk get close to you. And in general, try not to let those people near you anymore." You know what she says to me in response? "Well, Alex, such a friend you are. Why aren't you being supportive? Instead, you talking to me like that. I'm doing the right thing. I'm telling the truth, that you don't need to talk to people like that, and you don't need to get involved anymore." "But my friend, she's better than you. She's a real friend. She's a real mate," Seema telling me. "She supported me. She took me to the club tonight. She said I was alright." Well, that's great. That's exactly how devils behave. She tells you to get wasted and praise you. Then you'll be a drug addict and an easygoing girl. I'm telling you to stay home and do your things. And then what? That's it, no more friend. And that's how all people get lost over time. That's how every person is faced with a choice. And especially in a difficult moment, when you have an emergency, you are faced with a choice. Angels and good people will never run after you and will not beg you to do anything. And evil people will always talk very nicely and always offer you all kinds of temptations. Most often, it is of such a format that if your personal life or work has collapsed, it does not matter what, they will always offer to distract yourself. If you are offered to be distracted, it means that it comes from a demon. That is, you are offered to go to some resort, to get drunk, or to some clubs, bars, or to meet someone to distract yourself. It is all sin and it is all bad. A real recommendation from an angel, from a good person, what will it be? They will tell you to stay at home, read a good book, do not drink alcohol under any circumstances. In extreme cases, go to your parents. That's what a good man would advise you. I want you to just take it to heart, once and for all. I will explain in more detail what the old frequency is. I noticed such an interesting thing that people who complain about life, who have a lot of problems, they have all sorts of illnesses for some reason, all sorts of problems, that they have been cheated by someone, that they are victims of some swindlers, that they have some other misfortune. I noticed that all these people are not of low frequency, but of old frequency. That is an old frequency. Naturally, every country, every city has this high and low frequency in its own way. I will give an example in my country, Russia. The old frequency is when in 2015 to 2016. That is, it is already a modern time, when you cannot be afraid of a man with long hair to walk around, and there is nothing shameful in it, and when a woman can cut her hair short. And then I noticed that people whose life is destroyed are people who are connected to the old frequency, which is being destroyed. I naturally identified this list mold of elements as well. And I noticed that, I will give an example on men. They are men who overeat. That is, they are all chubby, fat, big like boars. That is not slim, but exactly or overpumped. That is in the gym, such bulls. They all look like some kind of policeman or traffic policeman. We had such policemen or traffic policemen before that time. Now they are no longer there. They were often shown in movies. They look like bulls or like pigs. And such men are often, if not fat, they are overpumped, so that their arms are not pressed to their bodies. It is not nice. But they think it's great. And they eat such heavy food, meat and potatoes. It's all so heavy. Most of the time it's Russian food, Ukrainian or Caucasian, or Czech, that kind of food. What else do they have? If it's perfume or deodorant, it smells so bad. It's like some cheap deodorant. If you buy it at the market, it smells like something chemical. All of them are shaved, they all have short haircuts. They often carry some kind of bags, some kind of leather shoulder bags. They wear blue jeans, black socks, badly worn or with holes. And that's one of 100 million examples, just so you understand. I'm describing to you one of the variants. And women of such men are big-breasted, big women with long, ugly hair, with hairdo when the whole hair is artificially curled, or with hair extensions, huge lips, a lot of makeup, long nails and rhinestones or painted, wearing blouses of all kinds, ugly heels. Also again, some kind of chemical perfume, very stinky, disgusting, the cheapest, stale clothes or with rhinestones. There are a lot of rhinestones. Maybe the word love is made of rhinestones on a t-shirt. And that's the lowest frequency. Most often they have their own hair, but very, very long, if we talk about young girls. They have such long hair and they think that it is very noble, beautiful. Because when you are connected to something, it seems to you that it is what you like. But that's a mistake, it's not you. You are just connected to it, but people don't realize that. And from the fact that they looked like that, that's one of how to describe what frequency they were connected to. Plus, these people, the old frequency people, were always taking advantage of discounts, promotions, which also connected them to this low frequency. Their avatars and social networks were such that a girl was always photographed with a bouquet of flowers. And if she was photographed somewhere, she would always put her hand on a monument, or on a bench, or on a table, always leaning on her arm. She wears such big, ugly glasses that cover her face. That's the low frequency. And men are like that. Tight jumpers, although the flanks stick out, and also fat or muscles, overbuilt up, tight jeans, which also look terrible. And how a man can wear this? This is the low frequency of men and women. This was then, in those years, 2010 to 2015. And if you see someone dressed like that, you can immediately draw conclusions. Also white clothes. Low frequency people like white clothes. White trousers with white socks and white jacket. That is, a high-frequency person will never wear it. It's like a curse. If you wear white clothes, trouble will happen. And they like to smoke hookah. That is also considered low frequency. But I'm talking about this criteria of Russia. And if we talk about high frequency, then a man should have a haircut like a student of Oxford or Harvard. That is, with fringes. That is high frequency. That is good. Or a long hairstyle like Leonardo DiCaprio or Tom Cruise has in many movies. That's the kind of man a man should be. Also, he should not over-exercise and have huge muscles build up. And clothes should be quite different colors. In no case one should wear blue jeans, but instead grey and preferably not tight. But again, depending on who you are, what kind of person you are, there are always exceptions. You can wear glasses, and women should have a short haircut. That is, everything should be so high-tech. I'll put it another way. When I saw that people have troubles and problems because they are connected to a low frequency, that is, to the old one, I invented my own special frequency, which I called the frequency of the future, so that it would be like something opposite to an old frequency, to get out from under the influence of the old frequency. And what this future frequency was built on was the frequency of minimalism. That is, that I noticed that the old frequency, they have everything colorful. They have magnets on fridges, colorful curtains, colored wallpaper, bed linen with drawings, shower curtains with dolphins. It's all old frequency, meaning it's all moving you towards poverty and misery. That's what I've noticed. And in order for people to get out from under this influence of hell, I wrote a draft. I called it Aurora. It was a book about the future. I said that everything should be minimalistic. If bed linen, it should be made of linen, just gray burned out color, graphite, or burned out green. That is, these are noble colors. And that's when I was giving James Pierce's clothes as an example, because there's lots of such clothes. And that everything should be understated. The shower curtain should be of a solid color, a noble color, a burnout gray or a natural green. And the clothes should be like that. Just some James Pierce sweatpants in a faded gray is great. And if you have a laptop, it shouldn't have stickers on it. And if you have a car, there's no way it should be stickers on it. And there shouldn't be any magnets, and everything should be minimalist. If you have a tea kettle, it should be either completely metal or completely white, but not in bright colors or with rhinestones. So all those rhinestones and flowers should be gone. It's better to remove the curtains altogether and hang simple blinds or blinds. That is, everything should be in minimalism, in such restraint, classic, high-tech, minimalistic. And those who listened to me then, I was flooded with feedback from my readers. Messages that said, "Thank you, Alexander, that it is simply unreal, as in life all turned around. As old people began to reach out to them, everyone says that they became younger, as if for 10 years and immediately their mood changed. And imagine how simple everything is, and all you need to do is to put your life in order. Just remove carpet from the wall and make repairs in the flat. And it's true. All the things we're surrounded by affect us. What we eat, what we listen to, what we watch, where we live, what kind of house we live in, it all affects us." And when I came to Moscow to buy a flat, and I don't know Moscow very well, it was 2019, and I was looking in neighborhoods there at different buildings, and I immediately said that the houses that are skyscrapers, there are flats for sale that many bloggers, who are with a bad soul of a low frequency, are bought themselves flats for easy money. I said that a high-frequency person does not live in the skyscraper. He will not live here, that it is not good. Those people who are more modest and reserved, they live somewhere else. And then I found it. This is Kamovniki. One of the places, of course. Doesn't mean that there is only one. But one of the places that is so restrained and modest, where people just walk with a dog, and the children who live in a family, they all studied abroad somewhere. Their parents are so decent. No one walks around in gold with pouty lips. This is the Kamovniki district. But that was in Moscow at that time, in 2019. I don't know, maybe everything has changed now. How interesting it is all organized. Even since childhood, people have told me that when someone communicates with me, makes friends with me, then everything in life gets better. One becomes successful in everything, one has good mood, confidence, and ideas come into one's head. And if a person stops communicating with me, then everything in his life is immediately deflated. And it turns out that we all influence each other, not on purpose, of course. And also, I noticed that I communicate with someone. But if a person offers me a lot of something and so on, then everything will not work out well. And why? Because that person's life consists of troubles, and it turns out that it affects me later. That is, you cannot ask a low-frequency person to buy you a bus ticket, because he will buy you a bus ticket on a bus that can get into an accident. That's the point. But that doesn't mean you have to avoid all people. You just have to take note that there are people above you, and you have to listen to such people. Because then it will be to your advantage if you will yield to such people, and connect to their frequencies and listen to their advice. And there are people who are lower than you, that is of low frequency, and you should not listen to such people. Such people should be told to be quiet and to listen to you better, because it will be only to their advantage. And because I am of high frequency, people are often offended by the fact that everything is always my way. And I say, you see, if it is your way, we will be robbed or attacked now, because in your world there's only misery. Or I'll become poor like you, I don't want to. Or I'll be sick like you, I don't want to. And it hits people's self-esteem, their pride, their ego. That's why many people, out of principle, everyone hog the limelight on themselves. Everyone argues with someone to get their own way. And it always upsets everybody that I often, when people were below me in frequency, I would tell them, guys, what you suggested, you can't do it. And so if a person recommends a movie to me, I don't watch it because it's low frequency. If a person recommends an establishment to me, I don't go there. And that's why I never listen to anybody. But there have been exceptions. It's only those people who are of a really high frequency. It's either a super material person of high frequency, some 11th, 12th, and if I need to buy something, I ask this person to advise me. I could just ask him without thinking, and he's on that frequency, he's connected there. He will give me advice quickly from that frequency. Something about material things, something to buy or somewhere to go. And there are also people from the heart frequency, that is from the frequency of the corridor, that is in creativity. And I also always listened to them and trusted them, because they are on the frequency without mind. And the ordinary people who are from frequency 1 to frequency 9, I don't trust them. Not because they wish bad things on me. No, they do not wish bad things to me. But just in their case, it is better for them to give in and listen to me. But many with such sins and complexes that they are not ready to listen to advice in my books, to my advice out of principle. And he does everything in his own way, and still they get a blow from the system on the head, but they are so proud. There is another remark. For esotericists, I will give an example related to frequencies. Now knowing that there are frequencies, on the basis of this, you can decipher a lot of things, explain to yourself. There are people who tell fortunes on tarot cards. I don't know how to do it at all, and I don't know what fortune telling is, what tarot cards are, or what number of them are. I don't care. Well, a long time ago, 10 years ago, I said that I could definitely tell fortunes on tarot cards, and people couldn't. I was asked why. I explained that I could switch my attention off from society and be zero, that is, in the corridor. And if I am sitting at a table and there is a person sitting in front of me, I will connect to his frequency. And when he asks a question, I will pull out that card that relates to his frequency, because I am connected to him. And that's why all kinds of shamans do a lot of rituals. First to go into a state without mind, so that then you can see something or do something. And I can do it, you know? And it turns out that I don't even have to do a ritual. I can just look at a person and then pull out a card. That card will completely describe who he is. One card is enough. And when a person tells fortunes now on tarot, and now it's fashionable and all very low frequency and unfavorable and negative people who have now become masters of tarot. And it has become mainstream, and therefore now it is shameful and low frequency to keep tarot cards at home, because it has become dirty. And the person who is now a low frequency, who has declared that he's a tarologist, then he thinks that he has learned the spreads and will tell everything about you, but in fact he cannot do anything because he is limited. He lives in the cell of society. He still lives on some of his frequencies. He's on frequency 4, 5, or 7. He's on some of those frequencies. And so when he draws a card, he's still going to draw a card for the wrong person. But there's another point that you have to catch me on. Because if a person has come to this tarologist and psychic, It means that he is of the same frequency as this psychic. It can happen. But it's always 50-50. That is, at some moments, all people cross each other anyway. Maybe a person got into the corridor and by stupidity or naivety fell for the advertisement of a swindler tarologist. It can also happen. And when a person is in a corridor, he sees all worlds, and that is why he can come across a person from World 3, where a person from Hell, a tarologist, offers his services. But it can be that if a person is closed material from frequency 7 and a tarologist from frequency 7, and here they turned to each other and told each other something. Yes, it can happen. But it's not tarot cards, you know? All otherworldly things, they have to be from an otherworldly frequency. It's not from society. But now there is a lot of esoteric stuff appearing in the world of society. And it's all fake. Because the real magic, spiritual things, it is only in the world without mind, in the creative world, in the world where angels live. And in society, it is all vulgarity. In society, it is just a fashion for show. Nothing works for anyone there. No one sees anything. No one feels anything. Tarot cards are just for show. Everyone buys them and spreads them out in order to post something on social networks. Everything is done for the sake of social networks now. And do you know how now you can also, knowing the frequencies, detect swindlers? Because if you know what is the frequency of heart is, spiritual frequency, and you know what is the material frequency, and you know how one contradicts the other, then if you see a girl who's half naked in a swimming suit taking pictures somewhere in Miami and writes that she's a spiritual practitioner, then there is no such thing. Because a person, a spiritual practitioner, she will not dress like that, she will not look like that, and she will never post a picture of herself in a swimming suit, and she will never be in Miami. And people don't know that, so people are easily deceived. And someone who knows frequencies can see everything. Another thing I can add about frequencies is an interesting case about Buddha and Buddhism. I was in Thailand, and then I learned who Buddha was and what Buddhism is. I saw that Buddha originated his Buddhism from the fact that he became a frequency translator, and a huge number of people were connected to his frequency. He had his own frequency. He was connected to some world that people were not connected to, and he was connected to it. First one. And then something happened in the world that caused the state to have to turn to Buddha. And they turned to him, and he, because of that, took the opportunity and began to broadcast this frequency to the world. That is, his ideology, his rules. And those people who started to listen to his advice, to his rules, they were connected to the source to which he was connected. And that's how Buddhism was born, and all the problems in people's lives went away. Because they disconnected from the frequencies where there are problems, and connected to the frequency where there are no problems. And even when Buddha was gone, his frequency, his source, remained. And people remained who are connected to this frequency to this day. That's how it works. And it works the same way for me. Many people read my books not even for the sake of information. And many people even fanatically hunt for me in order to catch me somewhere, to see me and ask me something. Or check how I choose things and what I choose, what I buy, what I wear, even though I asked them not to follow me. People do this because they have noticed that when they read my books or come into contact with something from my world, they immediately have some paradoxes, positive events in their lives. Everything in their life starts to be attracted to them at once. I explain to people that I do not show my frequency and my world on the internet. Since I am traveling through all frequencies, I can see bad people and take pictures. And I can dress low frequency myself and be in a low frequency neighborhood, because I am in all worlds. So you don't have to look at my pictures. That is the only place where my real frequency is. If you want to get in touch with that, read my books. And everything else, it's all untrue. It's only the books. That's where the real me is. That is something that also everybody needs to take note of. And people thought that since they found out that there are these frequencies, they thought that if they would subscribe to me and make friends with the people I subscribe to, their life would get better. So I purposely subscribed to just anybody, because I knew that everybody was going to be looking for my acquaintances. My real frequency is my books. And I don't just have one, I have many frequencies. And I'm on one frequency or the other. The heart frequency, the creative frequency, is the book, The 3 Paradoxes of the Creative Person. The mind frequency is all the other books that are treatises. So it's attention control, it's frequencies, it's the book Have Not Charity, for the developing of the mind, to cultivate the mind, and to be a disciplined and well-mannered high-frequency person, noble. And then there's the third frequency, the spirit frequency. That's alternate history. That's my novel. From the recent discoveries when I was working on my novel Alternate History, I would add, based on what I discovered in 2023, it's time. It's something unique. When I was growing up, evolving, I was exposed to topics like attention control, which is energy management, then frequencies, all these worlds. And the new one is like it's even more clear view, clear perception of the world, how it works. It's time. Everything we see is time unfolded from the oldest to the newest, and it's all time. Countries are all one country, unfolded from the oldest frequency to the newest. That is, from the lowest to the highest. In addition to countries, each country has cities from lowest city to highest city. That is, from lowest frequency to highest frequency. Also in a city, there are neighborhoods of the highest frequency and the lowest frequency. That's the way it works. It's inevitable. It's the way the world works. It has to be recognized. Anywhere in the world, even though you've been in the most expensive city and the coolest high-frequency city, there will still be bums and junkies on the outskirts. That's the way it has to be. That's nature. That's the way it works. That's how the matrix we live in works. And I'm already proving it scientifically, mathematically, geometrically in the second volume of Alternate History. The second volume ends at that moment where I prove it. And it's all about time. There is time even in people. You see people, and all the people below you are of low frequency people. That is, they are old frequency people. They are you in the past. The high frequency people, the modern people, are your future. And it's all laid out like this. And in general, everything we see is all in the future or in the past. That is why all the worlds in which people live are open to me. That is, everyone is in his own cell of time, and everything is open to me. That's why I can be in the future and in the past. And knowing the time, you can know what will be. For if you know what was, you know what will be. You can see now what a man will become and what he was. You can see the city as it was, as it will be. I came up with this theory a long time ago, based on the fact that when I saw the United States in 2017, I was there on the 19th of February 2017 for the first time, and I noticed that the United States is like Russia in the future. And as if in general everything that appears in America, it then comes to us only 20, 30, 40 years later. We're so far behind in time. And if you look at the countries, you can see which countries are in which time, but it's all spread out over time. And the conclusion is what? No frequency, when viewed through the eyes of the Creator, is bad. It is all God's creation, and all of it is time. And all of it is development. And all of us from the lowest frequency, that is from the past to the future. And everyone is living in their own time. So if we find ourselves in a third world country, you cannot despise them, and you cannot offend them. We were like this, and we will be like this. It's normal, it's natural. Everyone is in their own grade when they're in school. And you shouldn't make fun of the third graders when you're a high school student. You don't. It's not a nice thing to do. You have to approach it wisely. You have to look at it wisely through the eyes of a creator. So I can't in any way condemn any nation, any culture, any country. That's ridiculous. Only people who are in one extreme or another, that is, in some of the frequencies, can condemn and despise. I am beyond frequencies. I am beyond time. And my frequency without mind, that is the frequency of the heart. It is outside time. And time is different for everyone. It exists only in the frequencies of society in which people live.